Chapter 4757. These old customers who hide the breath of Kendo give Jian Wushuang a very strange feeling. But he didn't think much about it. After all, it is possible to live in this magnificent North Celestial state even if there is a sword fairy. After a brief discussion, the three of them went back to the room to rest. At Qin Qing's strong request, the three men were squeezed into a box. Jian Wushuang, who turned over and sat on the windowsill, shook his head helplessly. He gradually found that when he was with Qin Qing, he was more and more like the one who started in the end of the world and wandered through the world. The bad habits of eating, drinking, and sleeping should be quit in time. After taking a swig of beauty, after the so-called Chu wine, Qin Qing Kai lay on the bed and began to sleep. Spring and autumn, just after the interception that had no backhand at all, he practiced even more desperately. At the moment, except for the extremely powerful 8-armed wrath in his hands, he has no magical powers. Even in the face of an ordinary Yenxian, he will fall into great passiveness. Ascending to Yenxian realm is an urgent matter. Otherwise, he will never be able to catch up with Jian Wushuang. For ordinary Dingxiu, the achievement of Yenxian realm may be an illusory imagination, but spring and autumn are different. The blood of the former emperor flows on his body. Even if the emperor's luck brought to the extreme, it is enough to let him step into it. Yenxian realm. The whole Xianfu pavilion was very quiet, and even with the Sky City, it seemed to have fallen into silence. Among the immense clouds of Xianyun, the big day that brought Ruiguang to the entire Xianzhou gradually gathered Guanghua. The night that belongs to the northern celestial state is approaching. Sitting on the windowsill, Jian Wushuang began to sit down. Although he seemed to be sitting enlightened, his 5 senses of supernatural power were still observing around him keenly. As the cloud curtain gradually thickened, just as Jian Wushuang was about to take back his mind and prepare to go deeper into sitting, a subtle voice made him open his eyes again. He was familiar with the sound, the end of the sword. Inexplicably, Jian Wushuang thought of the mysterious 7 musketeers I saw earlier. It seemed to confirm his conjecture, and then, several breezes suddenly rose. Jian Wushuang subconsciously looked over his head and saw a total of 7 figures, directly flying into the sky, but disappeared into the cloud completely in an instant. He seemed to have some feelings and quickly awakened Qin Qing and Chuanqiu, and then stepped longitudinally, his figure straight up to Jiushao. Rising the cloud top, accompanied by the sun and the stars, but alone lacked the breath of the 7 figures just now. "Brother Jian, did you find anything?" Qin Qing and Chuanqiu followed him, standing on the top of the cloud. Jian Wushuang did not speak, but used his consciousness to deduce the shrinking mountains and rivers, and soon looked at the sky dome behind him. The 7 previous figures were weird. Let's keep up with the investigation, he said quickly, and then walked forward. Sure enough, traveling hundreds of thousands of miles, Jian Wushuang probed the breath of the 7 swordsmen from the clouds. With the breath, everything becomes simple. The 3 of them swiftly traveled along the breath of the clouds. Blocks of magnificent heavens were left behind, and these were just the tip of the holy North Celestial state. As the way forward, the strength of Yen Yen became more and more pure, and Jian Wushuang began to wonder in his heart. He had a hunch that the place where the 7 swordsmen were going was faintly similar to them. Water dial sees the moon, cloud dial sees the sun. As the breath of the 7 swordsmen suddenly disappeared through the layers of Yanli clouds, a magnificent fairy state came into their eyes. Xianzhou, which exhibits a diamond-shaped base, hangs high in the sky. From every corner, there is a jade belt waterfall, which falls on the sky. And on the side of the Xianzhou, there is another huge green tree, and a golden cage is hung on the top of this giant tree. In the golden cage, a round of red birds carrying a halo, the entire Xianzhou is very bright. Such a magnificent scene, although it is not comparable to the heavenly court where Zhenuyang is located, it is no exaggeration to be called a small heavenly court. Here, wouldn't it be the residence of Gongzi Mo, hidden in the clouds? Qin Qing looked at Xianzhou and murmured. Jian Wushuang nodded. Except for Master Zmo, no one would have such energy and could live in such a fairy state. Qin Qing frowned slightly. If this is really the residence of Master Zmo, I'm afraid he has already made a plot. From the current point of view, this magnificent Xianzhou, whether it is from the layout or the pattern of imprisonment of Jinwu, has a hidden meaning to the standard of heaven. I am afraid that any sighted person can guess it. The ambition behind this Xianzhou master. It seems that I'm going to clear the air for the little emperor. Chen Qing involuntarily tightened the real sword around his waist, and there was already a murderous intention in his eyes. I advise you not to take this idea. Even if the Sun Mo is again, you can't intervene. Don't forget that his old son is Zhen Wuiyang, Jian Wushuang said quietly, and added a sentence at the end, unless absolutely necessary. Chen Qing grinned, get orders. Mix into it first, then make a plan. Jian Wushuang said, and the back figure was the previous one, and went to the small heavenly court. Immortal rhythm, this Xianzhou portal is worth a lot of yenxian. However, these yenxian guards are all sleepy now. 3 ghost-like figures flew into Xianzhou in an instant, only driving the breeze. This dress is so tight. I'm afraid it'll be cracked during the follow-up. On the blue stone-paved avenue, 3 guards in uniform dress walked side by side. The headed sword Wushuang changed its appearance again, from the original downcast middle-aged man to a young heroic guard. Both Chen Qing and Chuanqiu changed into the faces of the guards who had been previously stunned. Chen Qing, who was standing tall, grumbled while carefully guarding the tight guard clothing. Being in this quiet fairyland, Jian Wushuang felt very carefully the sudden situation that might happen around him. Just then, a sudden cold drink sounded from behind. Stop. The 3 of them froze in place, and Chen Qing had already put his palm on the hilt of his waist, and just waited until the situation was wrong, and then beheaded. Jian Wushuang turned around slowly, staring at the guards without fear. You are on duty. Why do you want to go to the Temple of 5 Suns now? One of the middle-aged patrolmen asked. Time on duty has passed, and now we are going to the Temple of Wu Gongzi to be on duty. Jian Wushuang replied. Later, the middle-aged patrolman asked a few more questions, and he just answered the questions before leaving several people to leave. Brother Jian, it's really tall. How do you know these problems? I'm blind. Fortunately, I didn't reveal the stuffing, so go ahead. Chapter 4758. This is located in the middle of the north of Xianzhou, a small fairy state, and there are thousands of fairy buildings. The Temple of Heaven where the young Sun Mo is located is in this little fairy state. The Jinwu, which controls the light and darkness of the northern celestial state, is kept in a golden cage on the hibiscus tree for the owner of the temple to watch and drive. The ring of thousands of cranes, soaring and resting in the clouds, from time to time turned into a fairy, lying in the clouds, cast curious eyes toward Jian Wushuang and others. After stepping into this little fairy state, Jian Wushuang saw the magnificent temple next to the hibiscus tree at a glance. 3 figures stepped on the bluestone avenue, close to the Temple of Heaven. The sun is shining, Xianzhou will be night. Soaring forward, Qianglu of thousands of immortals was trampled under his feet, and the magnificent heavenly temple was gradually clear. The sole of the foot fell on the Haomiao square. Jian Wushuang and Qin Qingqiu at the side looked at each other, and then bowed their heads into the Temple of Heaven. Yu Yun rides on the wind, and there are some immortal music coming out of the Temple of Heaven. From time to time, there are more than a dozen maids dressed in luo sang, holding the silver plate in hand, walking under the jade corridor. In the vast lotus ponds on both sides of the Temple of Heaven, there are koi boys, lying among the lotus petals, playing in the water boringly. Seeing a few new faces, they all hurriedly moved over to Yunyu. Go, let me go away, uncles are doing business, come back and play with you. Chen Qing waved his arms, constantly driving the koi boys around him. These little guys may be too bored in the lotus pond. Instead of returning after hearing Chen Qing's words, they giggled and all lay on him to interact. In order to prevent multiple incidents, Jian Wushuang and Chuanqiu had to help take these little guys off Chen Qing's body and throw them into the lotus pond one by one. At this moment, an ethereal, but with a bit angry voice, suddenly sounded in this Temple of Heaven. I said, those 3 silly big guys, do you treat those little guys like that? Do you know that they are all my boys? Jian Wushuang stiffened, and then subconsciously looked at the place where the sound was made. I saw that at the top of the eaves of the temple that day, a figure in a leno skirt looked at him with a smile. Two of them hanging from the gauze in the air, like a faint moonlight, with a pair of petite jade feet shaking in the air, the silver bell between the ankles gave a very clear sound. The long wind blew, blowing her veil, revealing a look of shock. And then, those koi boys thrown into the lotus pond were all transformed into their original shapes, and floated to the mysterious and beautiful woman's body. The figure immediately stood up, a pair of jade feet stepped on the colorful glaze, and there were koi swimming around the body. Looking at the beautiful scene where immortal qi is about to reach the critical point, Jian Wushuang's eyes are more and more vigilant. He unconsciously reached out his hand and touched his waist, but he was surprised that his Tai Luo Excalibur had been blown up by Ding Beichun in the heaven of the sword. "Hey, ask you guys, three silly big men." Looking away from Xianyun, a pair of Xing looked at the three, and finally fell on Jian Wushuang's face. "Brother Jian, what are we going to do next? We're not going to expose it." Chuanqiu lowered his head, anxiously. "It's definitely not going to reveal anything. How big a girl's house can make waves?" Chen Qing whispered, "Brother Jian, in my opinion, ignore her, we rushed in." Jian Wushuang then spoke, and his voice became somewhat complimented. "Xinjia, our three brothers first entered the Temple of Heaven on duty and did not understand the truth. If they annoy Xinjia, please ask Haihan." The woman standing at the eaves of the Temple of Heaven heard the words, flew straight down the wind, and fell in front of Jian Wushuang, the whole body surging around. Jian Wushuang opened the distance without trace. "It turned out to be the first time on duty, and I said when you stupid guys appeared in the Temple of Heaven." A voice of anger came from under the veil. "But this is not a reason, you just bullied my boy under the seat, and now I punish you all to jump into the lap of the lotus pond." Chuanqiu and Chen Qing looked at each other, and their faces were awkward. Jian Wushuang replied, "I'm afraid it's a bit wrong. When we were on duty for the first time, we put on a wet suit, which would damage our appearance. When the woman gathered, she wanted to say something, but then there was a call. 'Mother, your son called you.' A maid stood in front of the Temple of Heaven and respectfully said. The woman who gathered the yarn did not answer, but looked at Jian Wushuang. 3 people, fortunately, you will be spared this time." After she finished, she ran barefoot to the Temple of Heaven. Chen Qing was indignant when she went completely away. "If it weren't for the sun's sight, I would let the lady know what cruelty is." Jian Wushuang did not speak. He looked around the temple in a circle, and was planning to make the next exploration. The woman who had disappeared quietly showed her figure from under the pillar again. "You still do nothing, all come with me," she said quietly, her tone unquestionable. The 3 looked at each other and then entered the Temple of Heaven together. The door of the hall slowly opened, and a warm fragrance came. In the middle of the magnificent temple, a large incense burner spit out clouds of smoke. There are 18 giant columns on both sides of the mountain and sea scrolls. There are 18 seats next to each giant column for the feast. At the same time, there are hundreds of dancers dancing in the clouds, and the extravagant scene of singing and dancing. After stepping barefoot into the giant hall, the woman with the veil directly stepped on the ground flowing clouds, like a fairy growing randomly between heaven and earth, and ran wildly. Jian Wushuang's gaze locked the deepest part of this temple in the first time. There, the 5 emperors in extravagant Chinese costumes. The son of Mo is sitting in the first position, drunkenly admiring the dancing postures of the dancers. Yu reading books www. Calm, he didn't consciously get up until he saw the girl with a light fairy deer coming, and was happy. "Silver Bell, you are here." The maids on both sides brought a luxurious dress and fur to her dressing. "Every day is the same old style, and I'm tired of seeing it." The veiled woman named Yinling, wrapped in a white fur, sat on the side of the sun's ink and pouted. Gongzi Mo seemed excited about Yinling's arrival with a little embarrassment. Okay, don't watch, you'll see the competition later." At the end of the conversation, Master Mo turned his head impatiently and waved his hands, and the dancers withdrew. In a moment, there were more than 20 handsome young men with red lips and white teeth, walking slowly up the center of the temple. "Brother Sword, have you ever heard that the sun is good at men?" Looking at the mysterious face of Qin Qing, Jian Wushuang looked at the question mark. Chapter 4759. Chen Qing smiled secretly again. "This is not groundless, but it has long been rumored that the son Mo Yoshi is male, and he once recruited Tianjiao teenagers in the entire big domain and sent them to his northern celestial state. It's cured so you can enjoy the beauty at any time. For example, right now, these handsome young men may be the male pets he maintains." Although Jian Wushuang still has no expression on his face, it is already cold in his heart. Looking at the more than 20 handsome teenagers who came out, there was a touch of imperceptible softness between each eyebrow, which seemed to indirectly corroborate what Qin Qing said. "Whatever he likes has nothing to do with us. Next, we will immediately withdraw after finding the zigzag bone armor. Try not to have disputes." Jian Wushuang whispered. Qin Qing and Chuanqiu both nodded, and then stopped talking. The identity of the three of them is the guard of Xianzhou who came to the Temple of Heaven on duty. Together with their faces, they can be easily transformed into ordinary ones. They are almost impossible to find if they are thrown in the crowd. Therefore, they stood by the giant pillars on both sides of the hall and acted as guards. Originally, Jian Wushuang did not intend to enter the giant hall, but was about to turn around this temple, but in the end, the steps were interrupted by the silver bell mother. Standing on the side of the giant pillar, he turned his gaze to the center of the temple, the handsome young men who were demonstrating sword dance at the moment. The so-called sword dance is more ornamental than practical. Although each of them has a stable sword, but lacks decisiveness and resoluteness, it is obviously used for watching. Although all these handsome youths are rare seedlings with swords, Jian Wushuang obviously has no love for love. The most important thing to practice kendo is the innate energy in your heart since childhood, which is the foundation. Ultimately, all things are big, and various Taoist laws are emerging one after another. Although the swordsmanship is special, it does not escape the rules of the avenue. Natural swordsmanship will also come down with the passage of time. These, naturally, can't have the slightest image of Jian Wushuang's state of mind. Surrounded by a silver bell ringing softly, the drunken son, Mo, smiling at the sword dance performance, seemed extremely satisfied. "It's so boring, it's so boring." Yin Ling, who sat in the top position, was dissatisfied. The son Mo Wenyan drew back his gaze. "What's wrong with Yin Ling? Dissatisfied?" Yin Ling pursed her lips. "Of course not satisfied. How many times have you seen it again and again, do you know, and do not change something new." "Well, according to you, you can do whatever you say," said Mo Chong, the son. Yin Ling drummed his mouth as if thinking of some new tricks, and then glanced into the hall. Jian Wushuang's heart said badly. His figure didn't even have time to retreat. He heard a slightly excited voice. "It's just you, the stupid guy before you went out." Yin Ling got up, her slender hands pointed at him coldly. Jian Wushuang was silent, so he had to walk daringly to the center of the temple. The haze in Gongzi's ink eyes dissipated somewhat. He saw the ordinary guard standing in the middle of the temple, and he always felt a familiar atmosphere. But he didn't think much about it. After all, in the current season, it is the most important thing to be able to win the favor of Yin Ling. After pointing out Jian Wushuang, Yin Ling slowly looked around again, and finally found a young guard who was not too conspicuous in the other side. "It's just you two. I can feel that you two are guys with extraordinary skills. It's better to play a martial art here." Yin Ling's mouth twitched a smile. While waving his sleeves, 2 coats with horse training, he pulled out 2 real swords and threw them at the two. Reaching for the real sword, Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly wrinkled. He didn't like this feeling very much, especially the feeling of being criticized by others. If it were not for the moment, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang had already killed Yin Ling. After all his emotions were settled, his eyes turned to the young guard who was also called out. Jian Wushuang didn't see all the emotions in his eyes, as if he didn't remember everything in his heart. "Go ahead, please make sure to go all out. If it's not exciting enough, maybe there will be punishment." Yin Ling sat down and smiled. Qin Qing, who was hiding next to the giant pillar, gritted his teeth and said, "Damn, if I have to make a last resort, I will kill this woman first. Also count me." Chunkius' eyes were cold, as if he was already preparing, and only after Jian Wushuang sent a signal, he immediately started his hands. At this moment, in the entire grand hall, only Jian Wushuang and the young guard stood against each other. Like Yuan Zhuyuezhi, he stood with his sword raised and his breath converged, like a supreme sword intention to be opened by a Tibetan front. In the face of any potential enemy, they keep their best. This is the habit that Jian Wushuang has cultivated in the long journey of cultivation. Even at the moment, he did not relax. The young guard standing with the same sword standing in the distance should have belonged to the youth-like clear eyes, and at a certain moment showed a very inconsistent old state. Naturally, this momentary change was also captured by Jian Wushuang. However, without waiting for him to think, the young guard took the lead in violently raising his sword straight down. Sword Wushuang raised the sword to deal with it, and the two blades handed over, making a brittle sound. It was just a moment of confrontation, and the thick sword was scattered and frightened. Although it was a fight, it has actually fought 1,000 times in a flash. Jian Wushuang secretly panicked. When can even ordinary Yangtzean swordsman be able to compete with his own rivals? Without thinking at all, the young guard slashed with a sword, and in a very indifferent face, there was a touch of imperceptibility. A sword came out, forcing him to open several positions. Jian Wushuang's eyes were a bit cold. The young guard was hiding under the indifferent expression, and the killer that he tried to control was emerging little by little. At this point, he began to be a little sure that the young guard at the moment could never be the guard of the Northern Celestial State. In other words, this guy at the moment, like the three of Jian Wushuang, should have stolen in as an identity. An uncertain idea rose from Jian Wushuang's mind. The two real swords collided fiercely again, and the aftermath of the martyrdom produced by the collision point directly wiped out the clouds of smoke in the entire Temple of Heaven. The whole Buddha's strength was pressed against the real sword in his hand, and Jian Wushuang's figure approached the young guard. "No matter what your purpose is, it's best not to hit my mind on me." The young guard's figure stunned slightly, a pair of turbid eyes, with a doubtful and scrutiny glance at Jian Wushuang, and then suddenly withdrew more than 10 feet. Chapter 4760. The Temple of Heaven was silent and everyone looked at this scene with breathless breath. The sword good swordsmen, when they saw this almost instantaneous confrontation, were all frowning. Because of the confrontation between the two of them, the sword intentions that escaped from them were absolutely uncommon. Especially the sword spirit that flew up in a flash, and even those who approached felt a kind of sensational killing intention of being cut by the soul. Sword stood without a sword, and it didn't seem to plan on the next battle. The young guard did not intend to fight anymore, and after the sword was turned around, he was ready to return. "Stop, did I ask you to go back?" An icy voice sounded, and the youngest son sitting in front of him protruded in front of his body. His drunken eyes were full of coldness. It seemed that the next moment would be a violent murder. The figure that was about to return was also paused at this moment. A pair of British eyes looked at him, and then arched his hand. "Point to the end. If I hit it, I am afraid I will make a joke. If the sun insists on watching, why not let me wait for some brothers to compose a sword dance for the sun?" The young man Imowenyan looked at the heroic guard who looked down, his face relaxed. "Well, if you are not satisfied with me, it will take your head." The young guard promised, and then turned to look behind him. A total of 6 guards in uniform dress walked out slowly from one side. Jian Wushuang saw this situation, his brow angle jumped slightly, and he stepped back without trace. "Brother Jian, is there something?" Chen Qing asked in a low voice. "If the situation is not right, just run," he whispered, his eyes flashing dignifiedly. At this point, Jian Wushuang was completely certain that the 7 guards were the 7 swordsmen he had seen in the Xianfu Pavilion in the Northern Celestial State. Right now, they all sneaked into this temple, and the goal seemed to be all running to the sun. Emo Qingqiu and the two heard it and were all cautious. They knew that Jian Wushuang's character would never be untargeted. He said that there is a situation, then there must be a situation. For a time, Chen Qing set his sights on the center of the temple, the 7 seemingly ordinary figures. There is not too much nonsense. The 7 figures are spread out side by side in the shape of a character, and then the 7-handed sword with entangled force points straight ahead. The atmosphere in the entire temple began to change subtly. Jian Wushuang and Chen Qingqiqiu moved towards the gate of the Temple of Heaven without any trace, but they were stopped by the silver bell girl sitting on the head. At this moment, the sword dance composed of 7 people began. Taking the leading young guard as the guide, the 7-handed sword moved and moved in the hall. The cloud smoke from the huge censer in the center of the temple was also transformed into various scenes by these swords. It may look like a dragon leaping into the sea of clouds, or it might look like a tiger lying on its back, changing a lot. Seeing this magnificent scene, sitting on the side of the temple, or the Yanxian could not help clapping and applauded. The youngest son Mo, who was sitting at the head, nodded frequently, and seemed to be very satisfied with the sword dance of these 7 people. And Jian Wushuang seemed a little uneasy, because he had just discovered that this 7-member team had a bigger and more powerful force. Although it was only revealed for a moment, Jian Wushuang was immediately shocked. It is very likely that those levels of Yanli power have transcended Yanxian realm. Are they going to assassinate Gongzi Mo? He seemed to think of something and then looked at him. Unconsciously, the 7 figures leaned forward. Yun Yen gradually spread throughout the hall, making every roof repair seem to be on top of the cloud, fluttering in immortality. At the moment, the son of the sun was gradually excited, and the eyes were even more drunk. In the 7-man formation, the youngest guard in the front, holding a real sword, is very powerful. In the eyes, which were slightly old, quietly showed a sense of Morin cold killing. At the next moment he jumped up suddenly, stepped on the clouds and smoke, and under the gaze of all Ding Xiu and Yen Xian he shook the real sword tightly and stabbed at the sun. The air seemed to stagnate, and everything that was about to happen happened at this moment. A sword that lingered on the supremacy, without any hesitation to stab him. But at this time, the change suddenly appeared, and the space in front of Gongzi Mo collapsed without a sign, and even changed the position of the sword stabbed with force. The sword that originally pierced the sun's ink head was forced to move, and finally without any resistance, it pierced the cheekbone and nailed it firmly on the temple chair. The screams rang loudly and blood poured out. The whole left side of Gongzi Mo was directly minced, the real sword penetrated half of his head, and the tip of the sword went straight into the hall chair for more than an inch. But this blow didn't kill him at all, and there was even a distance from the fairy source in his brain. One blow failed to kill. The young guard came down with one of his palms, and vowed to completely kill the son Mo. But the ensuing great coercion suppressed his momentum. A black robe came out from behind the son Mo, and also stretched out a palm, smashing towards the young guard. The 2 forces collided and a burst of loud noise erupted. Then the young guard looked like a kite with a broken thread and flew out. At this moment, all Ding Xiu and Yanxian reacted and manipulated Yanli to encircle the 7 people. And the 6 figures standing in place were all moved, and all were like ghosts. After quickly catching the young guard, they let go of their hands and feet to kill. One of them was tall and thin, his palms closed on his chest, and then it was suddenly torn apart. The infinite strength was torn the space directly, together with more than 20 top repairers who gathered around it, all turned into powder. There was another figure, the palm of his hand clenched into a fist, and he hit the ground with a punch. Boom! The entire temple shook, and then a series of fine cracks cracked the white jade floor. The 6 forms of body shape all broke out the most terrifying power at this moment. Everyone has the terrible power to kill Yen Xian easily. At this point, the entire temple was in chaos. As early as the first moment of the riot, Jian Wushuang took the lead in responding, directly reaching for the door of the hall, and running directly with the 2 of them. This kind of chaos, which is not controlled at all, is a little careless, and I am afraid that even he will drink on the spot. Brother Sword, this is too exciting. The young man Mo seems to be dying today. Among the 3 bodies that fled quickly in the void, Chen Qing said excitedly, it is all reincarnation. Someone came to assassinate. Jian Wushuang heard that the body that had fled quickly had stopped suddenly. Looking back at the temple of heaven that was about to have signs of collapse, he finally said, "No, I will go back." Qin Qing was surprised for a while, then hurriedly said, "Brother Sword, are you kidding me? Gongzi Mo is already a lifeless man." Chapter 4761. Jian Wushuang gazed at him. "Young Master Mo, he can't die now, and the news of his death pattern is broken. Isn't Lea Zai's bone-shaped armor more important than life?" Qin Qing was also anxious. About the kind of breath in the temple, he was more clear than Jian Wushuang. It was because of his clarity that he wanted to prevent Jian Wushuang from dying. "Of course, life is not important," Jian Wushuang smiled, "but this is the best situation right now." At the end of the speech, he went straight forward, without fear of the chaotic collapse of the temple. "Brother Qin Qing, might I be afraid?" Chuanqiu raised an eyebrow and smiled, and then caught up with Jian Wushuang without hesitation. Who is afraid? This small scene can deter me, Qin Qing anxiously, then clenched his teeth to keep up. In the chaotic temple, the top repair and Yenxian are continually dying, the ground is completely collapsed, and the entire temple is in a shaky state. The 7 bodies are like 7 rocks, and no Yenxian can shake them. A sword penetrated the cheekbones of the face, and the Sun Mo, who was nailed to the temple chair, stopped howling, grasping the blade tightly in his hand, and pulled the entire sword out of his head. At the moment, the ink of the sun, the entire left face was replaced by a huge blood hole, and even one eyeball was broken. As the son of the emperor of the entire Grand Sovereign, he had suffered such a terrible humiliation. "Kill me, kill them, and leave no one behind," the sound of crying blood resounded, and the black robe that had saved his life before bowed his head respectfully. "Yes, 5 sons." Stepping out, Wan Jun's supreme power swayed, letting the already fierce killing stop. The black robe stretched out the old palm and slowly pulled down the hood, revealing an old face full of folds. "Bring the head on, I will let you die, otherwise you will have to be humiliated." The ancient voice echoed from the mouth of the black robe. Behind him, there is a dim black light wheel. If Jian Wushuang is here, you will find that this black light wheel is exactly the same as the light wheel behind the elders you saw in the heavenly court. This is a sign of the complete transition from Yenxian to Dianxian. The 7 figures did not seem to be shocked by a Dian fairy. There were 2 figures on the spot, arms shook and a light wheel floated behind. Another 2 great Yenxian. It was originally planned to go forward and try hard to repair an Yenxian. After seeing this scene, all of them consciously took a step back from the battlefield. "It's really generous. I say, why you are not afraid. It turns out that you have already made full preparations." The black robe showed in the old-fashioned eyes, and he was not afraid. "With me in, you can never hurt the 5 sons." With a cold snork, the young guard who exposed the realm of Dian Immortal took a step forward, his palms coming. A blow completely out of the strength of the immortal, the cover hit the black robe. The black robe resisted and sent shock waves. Under these shock waves, even the giant pillars in the palace were fragmented by the impact, and even Yenxian could not stop. Gongzi Mo was directly flew out, and he was lying on the ground in a state of embarrassment. He watched with only one eye left, as if looking for something. At the first moment of the outbreak of this war, the silver bell snuggling beside him disappeared without a trace, as if there had never appeared. 5 sons, run fast, run fast. The white robe Yenxian, who has been closely following the Sun Mo, appears in time, dragging him and preparing to escape. The sun's ink was unnoticed, and his ugly face was expressionless. "You said it was the sun's correction, or the other brothers want to kill me? Don't think about this first, hurry to heaven." Bai Pao Yenxian was also scared by this scene. The assassination of the 2 Dian Immortals, such terrible handwriting. I am afraid that this entire division has no power to come up with, but now it has actually appeared. The young man corrects, must be the young man correct, I want him to pay for his life. The youngster Mo burst out loud, his breath rising at an incredible speed. The 2 Dian Immortals in the second town and the first one, while watching the Sun Mo still not dead, waved his palms, and the remaining 5 bodies were enlightened, and they ripped open and surrounded. Even the master's son Mo grasped and realized a fairy style, which had no effect on the situation at hand. When the venomous snake behind exposed its fangs, everything was too late to recover. The white-robed Yenxian who was standing in front of him even had time to reach out and resist, and the next moment it turned into a powder. The sun was stunned, facing the figure that was about to come around, motionless. At this moment, a physique carrying the general trend, moving clouds and riding the wind, rushed into the hall at an unimaginable speed. No one noticed the scene of the 5 figures that surrounded the Sun Inc. At first, a tall, thin figure holding a real sword did not stab at his fairy source in the slightest amount. Abnormal change, the tall, slim figure only felt a heavy kick kicking behind him, and then the whole person flew out. A kick will encircle a gap, and Jian Wushuang picks up his son's ink and moves back without any stay. Seeing the other 4 figures, they all stretched out their hands and held them in the air. Jian Wushuang only felt a tight chest for a while, and the speed of his retreat slowed down for a moment. He didn't think about it. He directly condensed an invisible sword in his right hand and cut off the invisible breath that trapped him. Chasing, the 5 people broke off in unison and rushed towards Jian Wushuang. But with the majestic sword in tension, it surged from behind the sword Wushuang, like the big river and the sea, and pushed directly to those 5 bodies. I said, "Can you change your goals, like me?" With the left hand holding the sword and the right hand holding a pair of ear flasks, Chen Qing's free and easy figure was blocked in front of several people. "Go away!" All 5 physiques pounced on him. Chen Qing broke into a sigh and led the sword to fight. After a moment of breathing, young Master Mo looked at the ordinary guard with heroes in his face, and inexplicably felt a familiar breath. Looking at the undeserved Sun Mo in his hand, Jian Wushuang directly pressed him against a giant pillar with one hand, and then pulled out a dense pattern of bones with sky patterns from his arms. "Give me this kind of thing." "Why, what?" Young Master Mo looked at the sword Wushuang, who wasn't a good man, and then looked at the sky-shaped bone armor in his hand, inexplicably familiar. "Don't play tricks on me, give this thing to me, I will spare you a life, otherwise, I will rush to crush your fairy source before they want to kill you." Jian Wushuang's voice was cold and cold. Inexplicably, the sun hit a chill, and his strong desire to live made his memories of the past gradually come to mind. "This thing, I also seem to have a piece in my arms." Chapter 4762. Jian Wushuang heard the words, grasping the sun's neck with one hand, and the other hand stepped directly into his arms. Under the combined offensive of the 5 mysterious figures, Chen Qing has been unable to persevere for a long time and has already begun to catch up. In less than 10 breaths, he had to find the sky-shaped bone armor and escaped from here. But at the next moment, the completely unmovable sun suddenly flashed a bit of tyranny, and the palm behind his back brought out a glimmer of light and stabbed directly at Jian Wushuang. A strong crisis rushed into his heart. He almost stabbed his head an inch at the same time as the light stabbed. However, it was still too late. The palm glowing in the light left a narrow wound directly in Jian Wushuang's neck, and the blood of the gods spewed out. He was in pain, the palm of his hand was unconscious, and the young man Mo took the opportunity to push it back with another palm, and then quickly escaped. Death! Jian Wushuang was furious, and his neck was recovered at a very fast speed. He smashed his palm forward and almost blocked all the retreat of Gongzi Mo. However, this established situation has changed again. The Sun Mo is desperate, pouring all his energy into the left arm, and at the cost of breaking the whole arm, tearing the majestic momentum of Jian Wushuang. Then, Master Mo turned around and looked at him bitterly, his body flickering out of the palace and disappeared. Seeing this situation, how could Jian Wushuang let him go? And even if Chen Qing was struggling to resist, Chun Qiu and the 2 heard it and chased them out. "Lao Tzu, I won't play with you anymore." Chen Qing's forehead and blue muscles are very fragile, and the figure that was almost hung up and barely separated. The 5 figures are very clear in goal, and there is no plan to fight with him again. Then he swept directly outside the hall. The whole temple was irreparably collapsed. In the sudden battle, A group of top practitioners and Yen Xian who had originally been to the Banquet Heaven Temple had already suffered more than half of their deaths and injuries, and the rest survived. They had already escaped from the Temple of Heaven. At this point, only 3 Dayan immortals were left in the whole crumbling temple. Under the 2 towns and 1, the Black Robe is embarrassed. The 2 Dayan immortals shot him down, making it difficult for him to get out of it, and even the immortal body vaguely reached the edge of collapse. Although he slept in the Temple of Heaven for a long time, the Black Robe is very clear. Except for the 99 people under the seat of the Emperor of the True Wuyang, the rest of the Dayan immortal in the vast territory is absolutely not more than 1 hand. The so-called Dayan immortal is a mysterious existence that completely transcends the immortal immortality. Only when you reach the realm of Dayan immortal can you have such a chance to touch the Emperor's luck. This shows that the scarcity and terrible degree of Dayan immortal. But right now, there are 2 Dayan immortals to intercept the Master Ink. What a big deal. Looking at the vast territory, who can have such a means of heaven? He couldn't imagine it, and even thought it was the will of Zhen Wuyang. Who are you seated in? But did you know that the killing of the Sun Mo was the enemy of the True Wuyang Emperor and the entire big domain? The Black Robe was still holding the last fluke under hard resistance, trying to let them know the serious consequences. However, the 2 Dayan immortals who met with him ignored it and did not care about the so-called Zhenwuyang Emperor in his mouth and the entire Daisai. The terrible force has already crushed and shattered the heaven above this little fairy, and countless ruins fell to Xianzhou, a school of destruction. And the son of Ben, who escaped from the Temple of Heaven, was like a dog at the moment, dragging a broken arm and fleeing desperately. Over the entire Xiaoxianzhu, the Red Prairie Field, and the extremely dark clouds under the hands of Dianxian vaguely showed signs of collapse. Jian Wushuang followed, and the narrow and long wound between his necks had healed completely, leaving no scars. What is happening now is far beyond his expectations. He didn't expect that there would be other people coming to intercept his son. And looking at this posture, it seems that it came from a complete extermination. Jian Wushuang does not care about his life and death, but the impact or consequences after this incident will be huge. As the 5th son of Zhenwuyang's emperor, if he falls, I am afraid that all the top repairs in Yanxian in this war will be thoroughly investigated. The 3 of them are also very likely to be involved. Therefore, Master Mo cannot die. Even if it is dead, they cannot die in their hands. Find the sky-shaped bone armor, and then escape silently, which is the best solution for the moment. After Qin Qing and Chun Qiu were in charge, the mastermind who led the incident was isolated, and 5 of the 7 swordsmen were isolated. Right now, only Jian Wushuang is chasing Gong Ziemo in the clouds. The vast clouds and the real life and death terror made him burst out of his final potential. Even Jian Wushuang, who pursued with all his strength, was faintly struggling and was pulled away for a short distance. The sun broke through the clouds and fled towards the center of the entire Xiaoxianzhu. There is a celestial hibiscus tree based on Xianzhou. The canopy of the canopy is composed of huge dark green branches, without a leaf. And above the crown of the sky hibiscus, a huge golden cage was hung. The golden cage is entrenched in a big day that cannot be looked directly at. At this moment, the young man Emonikang's body had already run to the hibiscus tree. I Ching, rescue me! A loud and frightened voice resounded from the mouth of Master Ziemo, who was already the end of a strong crossbow and placed all hope in his voice. And in the golden cage of the hibiscus tree, the dazzling round of the sun moved. The head of the bird with the golden light wheel slowly lifted up. This is a Jinwu with 4 purposes. As its bird's head lifted, the polar night was dispelled, and the 2 pairs of red eyes were like 4 big suns, and Yao Yao could not look directly. Well, the cry that is about to tear the territory is going to be heard the whole night in the northern celestial state was dispelled, and the light came. The golden cage was opened, and it spread its wings and flew out. With its wings and feathers unfolding, the glorious momentum shone to the fairyland. A total of 9 red-purple long ling, with the Jinwu wings spread out to form a giant sun, from its tail down, with a magnificent momentum. At this moment, Even Jian Wushuang lifted his hands subconsciously to cover his eyes, and could not take a step forward. It's too hot. A burning sensation from the depths of the god's soul made even Yanxian retreat. The transversal trend emanating from the Jiuling Zhenwu can no longer be measured by Yanxian. With such a breath, Jian Wushuang vaguely felt that it was about to reach a certain mysterious realm and reached another level. In his current cognition, this kind of breath has been infinitely close to the top existence in the heavenly court. Chapter 4763. Under the Zhenliang seat, there are 99 Dian immortals who are beyond the realm of immortality. This is what Jian Wushuang knows after attending the Feast of Heaven. He knows very little about the realm of Dian immortal. He only knows that it is almost impossible for ordinary Yanxian to achieve Dian immortal. Even if it is like Qin Qing, I don't know how long it has been trapped in that step. In the early days of Jian Wushuang's transportation of the Montenegrin crystals during the Great Sale, the wild fox Zen and the whirling ancestor I met were probably the closest to Dianxian. Finally, when they were about to be promoted, Jian Wushuang carried the power of the emperor broken his fairy source. Right now, the Jiuling Zhenwu with the general trend has the trend of the great Yanxian in this situation. Jian Wushuang's mouth could not help but show a bit of bitterness. The level of Dian immortal is not something he can contend with, it is just a breath of escape that poses a big threat. However, despite the matter, Jian Wushuang didn't want to return it. He didn't want everything he had done before to be wasted. Just wait for the wrong situation and then withdraw. Seeing Jean with stretched figure, Master Mo seemed to have caught the last life-saving straw and ran straight to it. But at the next moment, the change is steep. The majestic momentum of tearing the heavenly dome in total is like two scares, smashing towards the sun's ink, apparently running away, but the predictable situation did not appear. Those two general trends did not fall on the body of Master ZMO, and as soon as they flew, they were shattered by the Jin Wu's wings. The aftermath scatters the quartet. Although he escaped the deadly robbery, he is so weak that he can't even bear the aftermath, and he vomits a lot of blood. At the same time, two figures appeared quietly. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank slightly, and the two figures were the two great Yanxian who had just shot in the Temple of Heaven. He backed away slowly, ready to escape at any time. The battle at the level of Dian Immortal, the control of Yen Force, is not at the same level as Yanxian. The gap between the two is even greater than the gap between mortal and Yanxian. So what Jian Wushuang thinks at the moment is not how to spend time among the Dian Immortals, but thinking about retreating. Jean Wu's bird head with red golden light will glanced at the two Dian Immortals before looking at the undecided Sun Mo under him. It's clear, quickly kill them all, leave no one. Young Master Mo breathed heavily, and the big hole pierced by the real sword on his face had been restored, and it was weirdly pale. At the same time, Jin Wu's 4 eyes flashed a bit of disgust at the same time, and then he said to him in the back, I said, you dare to call me my name again, I will burn you into scum. Gongzi Mo shrieked, seemed not to doubt the authenticity of his words at all. Ming, understand, Zun, do me a favor and wipe out all those who are going to kill me. Jin Wu, who is well known for the facts, glanced at the two Dian Immortals again, and then looked at him with a smile. You have attracted such a powerful interception, the son of ink, your skills have grown a lot. Gongzi Maoen's face changed slightly. In short, you can solve the problem as soon as possible, I want them to live alone. A flash of laughter flashed in Di Qing's eyes, and the giant wings suddenly shook. Whether they can live or not depends on my mood, not on your decision. The giant wing covering the sky spreads out for thousands of miles, and the chirping sound emptied. Jian Wushuang only felt that the eardrum was about to be torn. He didn't hesitate anymore and was about to escape directly. The momentum displayed by Jin Wu was beyond his imagination, not to mention the two Dian Immortals. Just as Jian Wushuang was preparing to leave the back foot, a long sword with a sense of sensation reached his back. Don't leave if you don't want to die. A cold voice followed. Jian Wushuang looked back and saw that it was the young guard who had previously competed with him in the Temple of Heaven. At the same time, Qin Qing and Chuanqiu were brought over by 4 figures. Brother Sword, be ashamed. Qin Qing sighed with some bruises on his face, apparently suffered a lot before. Jian Wushuang looked at the young guard behind him and said in a deep voice, "This is a matter between you. We will leave now and do not participate in the fight." "Don't talk nonsense. Do you think you can still withdraw from the whole body now?" the young guard said coldly. Seeing leaving hopeless, Jian Wushuang prepared to take a break. The most intense battle broke out in the clouds. A total of 2 glorious generals evacuated the clouds and collided with naughty Qingxing to burst into the most violent martyrdom. Even the hibiscus tree was shaken, and the whole body of the young Sun Mo lay dormant in the crown of the hibiscus tree, which was already a frightened bird. And in the first time when this battle broke out, I Ching got rid of the gold and black form and turned into a figure. As the unreal wings with gold streaks fluttered, the 2 Dayan immortals could not get a step forward. Di Qing Na Yinggu looked at the 2 men with a bit of unruly evil spirit in his eyes. "Now I wait for the original path to retreat, I will not pursue it. If I wait still, I will let you die." Hearing this, the 2 tall, thin and big Yanxian who carried the black light didn't have any expressions, and they seemed completely disappointed. Their goals are extremely clear, and it is absolutely impossible to return to them just because of the 2 sentences of the meaning. Immediately afterwards, the 2 Dayan immortals worked together again, twisting the clouds, and the coming side covered the palm of the sky, smashing towards the Qing. Qingxing Yuan was not afraid, and raised her palms with a grin in his eyes to deal with it. At the next moment, Di Qing's seemingly flirtatious palm was actually resisting the advent of the heavenly palm. A red on surrounded the palm of the hand, and covered the entire palm of the sky with the singularity in a flash. It was only a brief moment, which was completely burned by Chimang by the joint efforts of 2 great Yanxian, and he didn't even stay for half a breath. Town. The 2 rumblings were resounding, and the supreme power quietly condensed into a dark giant tripod, once again smashing towards the Qing. The phantom red gold wings fluttered behind him, and I saw that every ray of red ons turned into a light golden black. A total of tens of thousands of Jinwu formed a large group and bravely attacked. Boom! The impact of the 2 is constantly being consumed, and the turbid black force and the red gold force are raging in the clouds, and finally the clouds can't bear and start to break. As the smashed inky giant tripod continued to dim, it was even more meaningful to laugh in the clear eyes standing in the void. At the same time, there are 9 red purplish long ling growing from between his hair tips. He grabbed one of the long lings with his hand and pointed the lingering point at one of the great Yanxian, and said lightly, "Since you insist on not leaving, stay here all. I will let you know, even if it is Dayan immortal. It is difficult for me to have a battle in front of me." Chapter 4764. A black and black treasure cover the sky, and the sun quietly emerged behind Di Qing's eyes, and the eyes of the big day cast a black flame. At this moment, even several swordsmen who used a real sword to hold Jian Wushuang and others retreated. "Enjoy it, everyone, and then you will feel the anger coming here." I Ching opened his arms slowly, and the magnificent Hua Yu began to appear from under his arms. The 2 were obviously Dayan immortalized face, and there was still no expression on their faces, but from their solemn eyes, Di Qing's words were true. Black Wu Baoxiang, screaming in the sky, the energetic force in the entire Zioxians had gathered towards him. With an unimaginable trend, the pressure fell down. Wisps of black inflammation condensed on the black Wu Bao phase, and it suddenly opened its mouth to cry, lowering the amount of black inflammation. Jian Wushuang and other people really saw that even if the black inflammation that came down was stained with a ray, even if it didn't die, it would have to fade away. Immediately, the young swordsman holding Jian Wushuang directly dragged him back quickly. "Unlimited." Di Qingxing smiled coldly. The 2 Dayan immortals joined forces once again, and an inky giant tripod, larger than before, stopped in front of him and smashed forward. The innumerable fire that Black Wu Tsongming dropped, like a rain curtain, was carefully poured in every inch of space. Oh! The shocking black inflammation, even the diffusive force of the sky, swallowed up, collided with the black giant tripod, and burst into a detailed sizzling sound. The tremendous power made the retreating people feel the unspeakable chest tightness. At the same time, black inflammation like rain pouring down on every place in Xiaoxianzhou. Large-scale destruction began. Thousands of immortal palace pavilions, all contaminated with black inflammation, collapsed and vanished, and turned into a fluffy fly. Xiaoxianzhou, which was originally the most powerful of immortal energy, turned into a dead domain at a very fast rate. At this moment, the ink of the sun lying on the top of the hibiscus tree, seeing the situation, the heart is constantly bleeding, all his insides are burned here. Junzun, leave me a little? In the end, he could not help but say. Responding to him, it was I Ching who froze coldly. Looking at his incomparable back, Gongzi Mo's eyes flashed a rage and resentment, but soon returned to normal. After all, he can only rely on the truth to survive. Wait, I will escape this disaster, and you must die without a burial ground. The sun said darkly. Only the general situation exuded by this black and black treasure phase pressed the entire Xianzhou, and no one dared to fight against it. The two great Yanxian who carried the black Wu Jiuqing black inflammation eventually exhausted the black inflammation at the cost of the destruction of the black giant. I Ching's face was cold, and he reached for a finger. The dark black head behind him suddenly screamed, dragging the terrifying dark yen power, and landed from the sky dome, about to swallow the two great Yanxian. It is dark in Xiaoxianzhou, and the strength is no longer quiet, but a violent tide is generated. Seeing this situation, Jian Wushuang broke up in an instant, and supreme power directly swayed the real sword behind him, and with the speed of the extreme, turned around a knee, and slammed into the young guard. Due to the fluctuation of Yanli tide, all Yanxian present could not detect the danger in time. Therefore, when the youth guard responded, it was already too late, and the belly was hit hard by Jian Wushuang. Mumming sounded, he was like a falling kite. One end fell towards Xiaoxianzhou. Almost at the same time, Chun Qing and Chun Qiu suddenly broke out, forcing the remaining 4 musketeers. Then Chuanqiu summoned his 8-armed eyes and fought against several swordsmen. Brother sword, quick battle! Chen Qing pulled out the real sword around his waist and looked sharply at Jian Wushuang. We will break it for you. Sword had no double-headed head, and then he looked through the waves and waves of tide, and looked at the sun ink lying on the hibiscus tree. At the next moment, he stepped on the cloud of his feet and sprinted forward. No matter the top of his head, he could destroy the battle of heaven and earth at any time. Just like the son of the startled bird, Mo immediately noticed Wushuang, who had swept towards him, and he became restless immediately. Respect the Lord to save me. Di Qing turned impatiently, and after seeing Jian Wushuang's flying body, without any hesitation he opened his palms directly, transformed into thousands of strands of strength, and walked away. Thousands of Yanli turned into unmatched chains, bound to the sword Wushuang at an indescribable speed. The dynamism of such a realm has been able to obliterate Yanxian. Jian Wushuang only felt that the air around him was somewhat stagnation and sticky, and the chain of thousands of Yanli forces trapped him almost instantly. Strong enough to crush the bones and bones, as the chain tightened, added to his body. Seeing this, his son smiled coldly, and one of his broken arms was given by Wushuang Wushu. Now the enemy was in front of him. He burst out in his palm. Looking at the dense chains of diffusive force around his body, Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes. Then, a small galaxy composed of 7 stars appeared in his eyebrows. This is a fairy style given to Jian Wushuang from that broken stone bead. A little mountain. Boom! A long ripple of water, with him as the center, directly stirred up, belonging to a fairy style beyond the perception of Yanxian, surging. Break me! Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes, the eyebrow galaxy circulated, and the general trend. Tens of strands of chains on his body shattered, and invisible and quality water dragons broke free from the N entangled around him. In a little mountain and river, Jian Wushuang is the absolute master. Breaking through the declining power of I Ching, he confronted him for the first time. Facing each other, Jian Wushuang had no fear, and reached out and waved gently. At once, a big vision appeared. The black inflammation that was originally brought down by the Qing dynasty was made into a dead area, and Xiaoxianzhu was suddenly divided into two by the unknown force. Then with countless gravel waste soil, half of the little fairy state, directly bombarded to Qing. I Ching's eyes narrowed. Can one use his own strength to divide the entire Xiaoxianzhu into two? Is this the terrible strength that Yanxian can master? Half a little fairy came out. I Ching pressed down the surprise in his eyes, snorted coldly, and stretched out his palm directly, holding it away. Immediately, the entire uncontrolled Xiaoxianzhu stopped strangely at the same place, and then seemed to be squeezed into a ball by an invisible big palm, and then crushed into scum powder. The robe's sleeves flicked away, and the powder disappeared, but there was a half-pointed sword in the same place. It's really interesting, a little Yanxian actually had a deterrent to me. Is this an illusion? I Ching looked at the long-gone figure meaningfully, and there was no next move. Chapter 4765. He did not intend to stop Jian Wushuang anymore, but to see what he intended to do. As for the safety of Gongzi Mo, in the eyes of Di Qing, it can be almost ignored. At the same time, the two Dian immortals joined forces and eventually defeated the Black Wubao phase of Di Qing. The dark power of Yan had dissipated. One tall and two strong Yanxian still stood calmly, but the slightly undulating chest showed that it was not easy for them to win. Di Qing was even more amused by this. If you only have these strengths, let's go, guys who can't help themselves. And the two Dian immortals, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke. Now it should not be ours, but you. If Zhen Wuyang knows that there is a person close to the emperor in his heavenly domain, you will definitely not survive. It is said that the grin on the original face gradually became stagnant, and a pair of black and white eyes also had a strong killing intention. You dare to threaten me? So what? As long as you continue to fight, Tianting will surely be aware of your existence. By that time, Zhen Wuyang will definitely shoot you to kill you. For the sake of a son, it is not worth it to put yourself in. Only you can never compete with the whole heavenly court. I Qingyue heard the colder his face. I hate threats the most. Since you threaten me, you must be prepared to die before me. Relax, I promise to kill you first when Zhenwuyang is aware of it. At the end of the speech, I Ching stretched out his hand and provoked a long feather between the hair tips. Then, a white Wubao photo that covered the sky and sun gradually emerged. Compared with the previous black and white treasures, this white-black is more tyrannical, with unparalleled beams of strong sunlight projected in its wide eyes. Qingqi! I Qingshin screamed. He did not intend to keep his hands, released the most tyrannical form, trying to suppress it directly. The big fight starts again. On the other side, Jian Wushuang got rid of Ti Qing's shackles and urged him to scold towards his son. The son Mo, who had already killed him and put him into action, saw the sword Wushuang splitting half of the Xianzhou with his own strength, and he was shocked by the shock, and he directly stopped in the air, and then reversed. The figure turned back to the hibiscus tree. Wanna go? Leave it to me. Jian Wushuang drank coldly and reached forward with a hand. The space immediately collapsed, and the ink of the sun who was flying suddenly staggered and rolled directly out. Taking advantage of this, Jian Wushuang equalized and suppressed him with a palm. The rock rising from the ground nailed him firmly under the hibiscus tree. Let me go! Gongzi Mo shouted in panic. I will give you whatever you want as long as you let me go. Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed, and he drew up with a straight palm to make him shut up. Then he reached into the arms of Master Mo directly. But he didn't find what he wanted. There was nothing in him's arms. There was half a piece of sky-shaped bone armor. What do I want? Jian Wushuangqiang swallowed his heart coldly. Gongzi's eyes were horrified. Which kind of thing are you looking for? It's really in my arms. I haven't discarded it. Jian Wushuang didn't look like he was talking in his eyes, and he searched again. But the result was the same as before, and the sky-shaped bone armor was still not found. You lied to me? Jian Wu's double-sided color was cold, and his raised palm burst into murderous air. The sun's ink surface is as dead as dust. He clearly remembers that after the jade bone armor was picked up by himself, he has never lost it in his arms, but how can it disappear now? Jian Wushuang did not intend to kill him. In this case, if the required things are not found, he must get out as soon as possible to avoid being affected. Just as he was about to leave an impressive lesson for his son Mo, he left a cold voice resounding from behind him. "Boy, go die." Di Qing's figure appeared quietly behind Jian Wushuang. Then he extended a finger and touched the back of Jian Wushuang. Buzz! One finger with the general trend of black and white, from the back without any obstruction, blasted his entire chest. Divine Blood, Yanli, Xianyuan, are all broken at this moment. Jian Wushuang's pupils were placed to the greatest, indescribable pain, with a blank of divine consciousness, which made him staggered, and then fell to the void. Di Qing withdrew his palms, and the color of regret was flashed away, and his back turned back again. The whole process was almost completed in one breath, and when the Sun Mo reacted, Jian Wushuang's broken figure was no longer alive. "I'm fine, I'm fine," he murmured as he sat under the hibiscus tree. The entire northern celestial state has been completely chaotic, and all the top repairs and Yenxian that have not been affected have left in the first time. And the guards who should have arrived in the first time, after seeing the terrible scene of the Dian Immortal battle, all tacitly played and disappeared. The entire northern celestial state is located in the most northern territories of Desiyu, not far from Tianting. So at this moment, what happened in the northern celestial state has not affected the rest of the sky. On the broken ground still lingering with speckled black inflammation, a broken figure lay on his back. The belly in front of him was empty, replaced by a big hole, and the fairy body was nearly broken by half. This kind of injury, in exchange for the rest of Yenxian, is already too dead to die. However, if you look closely, you can find that this figure, which should have disappeared, is full of the vigorous life that only souls have. The broken fairy body is also repairing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Immortal body, even if the source of the fairy is broken and the strength is scattered, but as long as there is a will to survive, it is enough to reshape. In the same way, this was replaced by the rest of Yenxian, who was supposed to have a deadly injury on Jian Wushuang, not even a heavy hit. His fingers moved slightly, and his blank consciousness slowly recovered. Although the immortal body is constantly recovering, the severe pain after trauma still affects him. Above the clouds, a great battle still erupted, and the magnificent martyrdom exploded. Jian Wushuang lay on his back, expecting to recover soon. At this moment, a pair of white and tender feet tied with silver bells quietly stepped on the ground burned by flames. It seemed that the owners of these feet could not feel the heat. The luo skirt hanging on the ground was melting, exposing the bright and extremely pale skin of the calf. In the end, the master of these feet came to Jian Wushuang and squatted slowly. At the same time, a quaint and fissured gully was placed in front of him. Chapter 4766. Jian Wushuang's pupils condensed, and his breathing became heavy. The jade piece that caught his eyes was exactly what he had been looking for unsuccessfully. At this moment, the figure holding this bone armor is the Silver Bell Mother who had been staying with Gongzi Mo. Jian Wushuang reached out unconsciously to grasp, but the silver bell suddenly withdrew his palm. "This thing, you need it very much?" Yinling waved his bone armor and looked at him playfully. Has returned to almost the same sword. Wushuang, propped up from the ground, staring at her closely. "This thing is not useful to me, but it seems that you need it very much," Yinling said slowly. "I can give it to you, but you have to promise me a condition." "Say." Jian Wushuang frowned. Yinling nodded. "The conditions are very simple. Take me out of here, and eternal life will no longer set foot here." I originally did not intend to exchange the swordsmanship of the exchange conditions. After hearing this simple news, I nodded directly. "Yes, I promise you." Yinling smiled, but when he reached over, he quickly shoved the bone armor into his chest. "I can't give it to you now. If you change your mind temporarily, it's me who is unlucky," Yinling said seriously. "So I must leave by Shangxian's, who completely before I can give this thing to you." Jian Wushuang heard the words, and did not express too much. Now, another piece of sky-shaped bone armor is in front of him, which greatly saves his energy. At the same time, in the face of such a simple request, you can change to a bone armor, not to mention regenerative killing. Although she may be a cumbersome or unstable factor, Jian Wushuang has decided to take her away. Reaching out the entrance of the crystal plug of the top of the Black Mountain to quickly nourish the newly recovered meridian, he said, "You wait here first, I will go back and I will pick up later." Yinling shook her head directly. "No, I'll go with you. The variables are too big now, but it might be safer to follow you." Jian Wushuang was helpless, and regardless of her, he hurried to the sky. Although he wanted to restore his eyes to the truth that had hit him hard, the gap between the two was really too large. It would obviously be unwise to take revenge without consideration. Jian Wushuang took a deep look at Tai Qing and was ready to pick Chen Qing and Chuanxiu together. Just then he glanced at the corner of the hibiscus tree. "I saw a ghostly figure emerge quietly behind the frightened Sun Mo. Perhaps the strange breath behind him was noticed, and the sun subconsciously shifted into a subconscious form. A flash of cold light flashed through, and the majestic vigorous force directly crushed his half-body into scum powder. The screams resounded. "Yunzuan, save me!" But at present, Qing Qing is in a struggle with the two Dian immortals. It is already very difficult to get rid of her figure, and it is even more impossible to go to aid like before. If it weren't for his subconscious turnaround, only the sneak attack would be enough to make his body disappear. Gongzi Mo's half-body was completely broken, and he collapsed under the hibiscus tree, his face ashes. The ghost-like figure slowly came to him, holding a real sword in his hand. The ghostly figure is wearing a spooky mask, but judging from the figure, it is a woman. Obviously, it was her who caused the greatest damage to the sun. Seemingly feeling the danger of dying, Gongzi Mo calmed down from the initial panic and began to fight back. With only one arm left, he released the majestic force and slammed into the ghost body. But at the next moment, she instantly cut out the sword and directly cut off the only arm left by Master Mo. The ghost body did not want to talk nonsense, after severing his arm sharply, urging the majestic force to break its fairy source. Abnormal changes. That magnificent trend was suddenly cut off before touching the fairy source of Gongzi Mo, and then, together with the ghost body, was trapped by a peculiar force. It's true again. He is really terrible. Just a wave of hand can easily trap a Yenxian. The ghostly figure did not anticipate this scene, and when the reaction came, everything was too late. Di Qing grabbed and held her, apparently intending to smash its fairy source directly from the air. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's figure suddenly arrived, holding the invisible sword, and directly cut off all the connections of the ghost's body. Di Qing's eyes suddenly glared, as if he saw something incredible, and he was obviously very surprised that Jian Wushuang was still alive. But he could no longer withdraw, facing the two seemingly vulnerable but extremely difficult Dian immortal, and unable to exert his full strength, he could only confront this way. Because once the Qing dynasty has made a more supreme trend, his unique breath will inevitably spread throughout the northern celestial state. If Tianting is aware, his ending will only come down or die. Therefore, he couldn't use his full strength at all, and could only stick together like this. Although the life and death of Master Zmo are not in the mind of Di Qing, the enlightenment dojo he can give and some conditions are still very rich. The true black blood veins formed by the living creatures of the heavens and the earth, no matter how the avenue flows, are the most ancient and top-notch existence. Since the practice of Kingwis practice has been completed, 9 roots have been cultivated, and if there is one more, one can realize the emperor's luck and reach the throne. So now, he can't have any failure, even with the ink of the sun who provided him with dojo and resources. Jian Wushuang and Yi Qing coldly looked at each other, pulling the ghost body back without fear. The ghost body was slightly unnaturally freed slightly. After Yu reading www.ukakanshu.com was found to be in vain, he simply let him be involved. Back under the huge hibiscus tree, Jian Wushuang slowly spit out a murky breath. Waving his arm free of Jian Wushuang's palm, the ghostly figure with a mask came to Gongzi Mo. Perhaps after a series of fierce battles, the mask belt behind the ghostly body-shaped hair suddenly fell off, and then immediately fell down with a whole black gold mask. The green silk hung down, revealing a beautiful and delicate cheek with a little paleness. "It's you," Jian Wushuang blurted out subconsciously when he saw this highly recognizable cheek. "Zheng Ying." This woman with a beautiful and delicate cheek. It was Jian Wushuang's first voyage to the day when he reached Dayanhuan, and the spring and autumn of the Black Mountain Spar, soon after he defeated the giant Si Tianzhong, and then saw it in a sea area. To the unconscious woman. And after hearing the word Zheng Ying, the ghost body was shocked. Obviously it was not expected that someone could call her a name in such a place. Chapter 4767. For a moment, the air fell into a state of silence. Jian Wushuang soon came to understand why Zheng Ying was surprised, because he has now turned into a normal guard's face, which is completely different from his previous face. It was Zheng Ying who didn't recognize him as the Sword of Wushang on that voyage. It's just that at the moment when the two of them met again, they were so weird. This woman who disappeared quietly after the War of Woseocean, why is it suddenly appearing in Baiyin Xianzhou right now, and it seems that he is running to kill the son of the town? Is she the messenger of a certain emperor under Zhenliang? Jian Wushuang was a little uncertain, but opened his mouth slightly but said nothing and then turned to leave. At this moment, a sudden big crisis behind him made him suddenly turn his head. Then a tangled real sword almost rubbed his neck and thrust forward, bringing a trace of blood. If it wasn't for evasion in time, this sword was enough to cause serious damage to sword warriors. After he was able to escape the crisis, he turned to look at Zheng Ying, his eyes watery. Zheng Ying's beautiful face is cold and frost at the moment, and he holds the sword in his right hand. He doesn't even say a word, and carries Yanli to kill Jian Wushuang again. "What's wrong with you?" The food caught the blade that went straight to his door in the blink of an eye. Jian Wushuang pressed his heart and angered, and came to Zheng Ying with such a sentence, "Really I am a soft persimmon?" Zheng Ying, who was still in the stabbing state, was stiff again, and there were some doubts in her cold eyes, because she heard something familiar from the young guard in front of her. But at the next moment, a more chilling murderous intention broke out. From behind Zheng Ying, there were suddenly hundreds of magnificent vigors, all of which were suppressed to Jian Wushuang. Rao thought about his old feelings again, and Jian Wushuang also raised his anger. He suddenly slammed the front with his palms, and fought against those forces. A small burst of martyrdom stirred up under the hibiscus tree. At the same time, Jian Wushuang pointed out again, turned into several Yanli water dragons, trapped to Zheng Ying. He didn't want to put Zheng Ying to death. After all, he was one of the few people he saw when he first came to Dayanhuan, so he only aimed to trap her. But the more this is, the more fierce Zheng Ying's resistance is, exceeding the general strength of Yan Xian, which makes Jian Wushuang also a headache. "What are you going to do? Don't go too far, Zheng Ying." Jian Wushuang looked at the woman in front of her and said in a deep voice. Zheng Ying, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke, "How do you know my name?" Jian Wushuang was silent when he heard the words. Only then did he realize that he could not reveal any information about himself at all. At the end he emptied and pushed Zheng Ying away. "Don't care who I am, I advise you, Sun Zimo is better not to kill." After leaving this sentence, Jian Wushuang apparently didn't want to get entangled anymore, and just walked away. Looking at the somewhat familiar back, Zheng Ying did not catch up, but turned to look at the prince's ink lying under the hibiscus tree. After several fights and escapes, Gongzi Mo has already opened his eyes, leaving only his eyes unwilling. Under the cooperation of Diqing and Dianxian, the entire Xiaoxianzhu and even the North Tiangxianzhu are on the verge of collapse. The old root of Panshan in the hibiscus tree has broken, and the gravel is falling. Zheng Ying stepped forward, facing the setting sun of the sun. Without any hesitation, a sword cut off the head of the Sun Mo. Then she stretched out her palm again, releasing the majestic force and crushing his fairy source easily. At this point, Zhen Weiyang seated the fifth emperor, Sun Inc. Under the hibiscus tree. The northern Tiangxianzhu, which was supported by Gongzi Modi's Qiyun, began to collapse, and all avenues and Qiyun began to be disordered. Heaven and earth mourn. This is the reaction of the death of the emperor. And Zheng, the terminator of everything, looked at the dead head in his hand and waved his hand to intercept the last luck of his son, Mo, who belonged to the emperor. In the end, the head turned into a cup of powder and fell under the hibiscus tree. The emperor passed away, and the avenue of heaven and earth shuddered. At this moment, Yanxian or Dianxian, who fought in the northern Taiangxians, noticed. Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at the end with a complicated look. The figure standing under the hibiscus tree then left quickly. In the end, Gongzi Mo died, and any Yanxian or Dianxian present would definitely be thoroughly investigated by heaven. If any clues are left, it will surely be a disaster. Jian Wushuang will never forget that, apart from the true Wuang who is emperor's luck, there are 99 Dian immortals in the entire heavenly court. Any one of them has the absolute power to play against the Qing dynasty alone. So right now, escaping quickly is the most correct choice. Qin Qing and Chuanqiu, who are fighting desperately, only feel that they are all loose. The mysterious 5 swordsmen stopped the offensive, and they all screamed at the sky dome, "The son of ink is dead, withdraw." The 2 blood-stained Dian immortals heard the words and gave up the confrontation with Di Qing directly, preparing to escape. "Want to run? Leave it to me." Di Qing screamed angrily, his arms shook, and they grabbed them. The 2 great Yanxian, hurriedly running Yanli's general resistance, and at the same time he said with a deep voice, "Young Master Mo is dead, heavenly court will inevitably pursue it, and now he will not go again, you can't walk away if you want to go." Yi Qingqing smiled, "There is so much time, I will kill you first, and it will not be too late." No brain idiot. Since they couldn't get away, the 2 Dian immortals were also anxious. At this node, staying here for one more point, the more unlikely it is to escape. But Di Qing did not allow them to leave, and once again struggled. "Spring and autumn, Qin Qing, let's go." With a deep voice, Jian Wushuang's body was like electricity, carrying the general trend, directly opening the blockade of the 5 swordsmen and giving aid to the 2. Qin Qing and Chuanqiu nodded, and the 3 escaped together. Brother Sword the son Mo really died? During the escape, Qin Qing couldn't help asking. He still couldn't believe it. The 5th emperor under Zhenliang just died like this? Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, the luck has gone, and there is no chance of survival by chance. Qin Qing nodded, not knowing whether it was joy or worry in his eyes. Damn it, playing so hurriedly, I actually forgot to sprinkle hot urine on the temple of heaven. Don't think about it, run away from here first. The northern celestial state is vast, but with the dispersal of the emperor's luck, the avenue is extremely disordered, and the entire celestial state is irreversibly broken. And Jian Wushuang is to run away from Xianzhou with all his strength before Tianting comes, and hide the breath as much as possible. The chaotic situation right now is exactly what he wants. As long as he leaves Xianzhou, even if the emperor comes in person, he will never be aware that he has been there. Chapter 4768. Under the hibiscus tree, Zheng Ying glanced back. The figure that had gone away, she seemed a bit enlightened. After counting interest, her figure disappeared quietly when the hibiscus tree completely collapsed. Brother Sword, at most within half a day, we can leave this Xianzhou. Have you found what you need? Qin Qing asked. Jian Wushuang didn't open his mouth, but looked at Yin Ling, who was right next to him. You can rest assured that as long as you are out of this northern celestial state, you will get what you want immediately. Yin Ling patted the chest that had peaks and smiled proudly. Without a double-sided color, the sword turned his head to the side. Seeing this scene, both Qin Qing and Chun Qiu looked a little strange. Isn't this lady the woman of the son-in-law? Qin Qing looked a little stunned again. Yin Ling heard the words. Qiong Nose snorted. Hey, that stupid big one. Which one of your eyes saw me as a son of ink? I was just him imprisoned by him. Now that he is dead, I am free. Qin Qing pouted and didn't say much. 4 completely hidden figures are leaving quickly. But in the next moment, Jian Wushuang felt a big crisis. Seemingly to confirm his thoughts, the northern celestial state, which had been trapped in the red and dark, began to be illuminated by a white gold awning. Then, just as Jian Wushuang and others were about to step out of the northern celestial state in one step, a barrier with invisible haze appeared outside the northern celestial state. Well, Jian Wushuang's heart sank fiercely, and a chilling impression swept through. Chun Qing and others saw the situation, and the mood also sank to the bottom. The whole broken north celestial state was blocked by external forces. And those who can block by Shangxian's with such a general trend, except for that kind of existence, even Dianxian can't do it. Jian Wushuang's eyes revealed a dignity and bitterness. Brother Sword, what should I do? Do I have to rush out? Chen Qingning said with a sharp voice. Jian Wushuang shook his head. From now on we can't use our strength. This barrier is definitely not something we can break through and watch its changes. After he finished speaking, he took the three men directly to a broken Xianfu pavilion, converging all his breath. On the broken sky dome, hundreds of millions of white gold mansions began to bloom and empty against the clouds. At the same time, there are tens of old men carrying all kinds of light wheels, coming from the clouds. The original Qing, who was still fighting on the sky dome, also noticed this scene. Damn idiot, wait to die. One of the great Yanxian who fought against Qingqing exasperated and wanted to tear away Qingqing. Di Qing withdrew his palms and looked at the old men standing in the clouds, and there was a big fear in his eyes. The two great Yanxian glanced at each other, and their backs flew from left to right. Evil creature! One of the old men carrying the dark black wheel lifted his palms, showing a tendency to cover the pressure. Even if they were separated by millions of stars, they still directly captured an escaped Dian immortal. At the same time, there was another old man carrying a red light wheel, took a slap-sized porcelain bottle from his arms, and directly ingested another Dian immortal. But in the blink of an eye, the two escaped Dian immortals were all caught. Afterwards, the old man carrying the black light wheel used his magical power to squeeze the two Dian immortals into the size of a projectile. 5 sons, are you buried in the hands of air? Hong Zongdala's magnificent sound was heard through Xianzhou. The two great Yanxian who had never been able to live forever were all frightened at the moment, because they saw that there was an ordinary old man in black robe, walking slowly. This old man is Yu Bo, the most mysterious elder behind Jin Wu Yang. It has nothing to do with us. We just passed by here. The 5 sons were not killed by us, but someone else. They still wanted to say something, but the old man in black robe just flicked their hands at them, and then let their spirits disappear, and the immortals disappeared. What terrible strength is this, destroying Dian immortal? And even the power of Yen has not been released. On the cheeks full of ravines, it seemed as though he had done all the secrets of the vicissitudes of the world. Eventually he looked at the muddy eyes, not far away. I Ching slowly stepped back half a step and stared at him. 5 sons, do you bury your hands? The hoarse voice sounded, and Yu Ba's eyes were calm to horror, as if time had stalled. Proud to be as clear as the meaning, they have to bow their heads at this moment. No, it is not possible to be buried in my hands, but in the hands of their associates. There was a woman who cut down the hair of his son Mo, and destroyed his fairy source. Di Qing pointed his finger to a distant place. 5 musketeers, Shin said. Yu Bo looked pale. He slowly stretched out his palm from the sleeve of his robe, and slowly grasped in the void. Along with his grasp, the northern Tiangxianzu, which was on the verge of breaking, accelerated the breakage. Whether it was the Xianfu pavilion or the thousands of creatures, it was inevitable that it turned into nothing. In this case, all of you will be buried with the 5 sons. Gu Jis' old voice resounded. Yu Ba's voice is like an avenue, making the entire northern celestial state irreversible. Di Qing's pupils suddenly froze. He stepped back a few steps. What do you mean? You have clearly told you the real murderer. Why don't you let me go? The death of the 5 sons is inseparable from the entire northern celestial state, and naturally you all have to be buried together. Yu Ba's voice was indifferent and unquestionable. Di Qing's complexion was blue. Do you think you'll take care of me like this? If I leave, no one can stop me. At the end of the speech, a huge golden treasure was revealed behind Di Qing, and his entire body was filled with a faint prestige. Facing more than 10 Dian immortals carrying light wheels and unpredictable Yu-Bo, he chose a battle. But the battle hadn't even started yet. Yu-Bo reached out his hand and pointed a black light through the void, tearing away the golden and precious treasures of the Qing dynasty and smashing his fairy source. Dead silence, extreme dead silence. It's impossible for a lifetime, so arrogant that the essence of one enemy is two, and his fairy source is so broken. The breakdown of Xianyuan is irreversible injury, which symbolizes the final death sentence of Yan Xian. Di Qing died in this way, thousands of Hua Yu stripped from his body, scattered in the void. Then, his figure was planted into the broken Xianzhou. After one finger extermination, Yu-Bo raised his arms again, and the entire northern celestial state, under his control, was completely crushed into powder. Even if it is Yan Xian, they will never survive. With the death of the 5 emperors and the son of Mo, the entire trillion creatures in Xianzhou were buried with him. There is no one who can repair Yu Yen and escape from the road of Yu-Bo. But perhaps, everything should have exceptions. Chapter 4769. With the entire North Celestial State completely crushed into powder, trillions of creatures were buried with each other. Yu-Bo returned to heaven with the elders. Come in a hurry, go in a hurry. Everything seemed to be erased, and it never seemed to exist. The thick powder was swallowed and absorbed by the wind in the world. The heavens originally belonging to the Northern Celestial State were erased and replaced by nothingness. Perhaps it will take millions of reincarnations of the galaxy before it is possible to give birth to a new heaven. In the star-studded world, as the powder fell, there were still faint auras. Brothers, let's be developed now. Who has ever seen such a crystal with such a strong and pure power? God, this can be more tens of than Tianjing, wrong, hundreds of times. Unexpectedly, in this desert where the birds are not shit, we can find such treasures by our brothers, so we should be developed. No, how come there are legs? In the yellow sand that covered the sky and the sun, there were more than 50 men in thick and long suits, swallowing saliva in the face of the black spar as high as the hill. And these men's cultivation practices are actually not weak, all of them are ancestor-level cultivation. At this time, the 2 guys closest to the black spar, after seeing a leg pressed under the spar, stretched out their hands directly. Wow la la! Along with the collapsed flow of black spar, the masters of those legs finally appeared. Oldest, this is a man. The bearded man could not help chanting after seeing the figure clearly. Noisy, haven't you seen a man? One of the white-faced men glared at him angrily, then fixed his eyes on the unconscious man, and took a breath. At this moment, the man who was comatose in the crystal of Montenegro had all his upper body clothing torn, revealing a shapely figure. At the same time, his naked skin was extremely red, as if soaked in blood, and on his chest, there was a flaming phoenix that seemed to be able to break free from the and rush to the sky at any time. At the first sight of this unconscious mysterious man, a big crisis emerged in the heart of the white-faced man. The instinct to escape several times told him that this man is definitely a terrifying existence. Boss, there are people here. The Nahua man shouted again, pointing at the other leg buried in the black spar. Boss, what should we do? The man who also saw some clues and asked in a deep voice, also saw a bit of fierceness in his eyes. The white-faced man is not the hesitant, when even narrowing his eyes, while they are all in a coma, kill them on the spot, leave no one. All the top repairers ordered their lives and rushed forward eagerly, and manipulated their respective strengths in preparation for killing. But at this moment, a shocking strange noise suddenly resounded, followed by countless strong and powerful forces, and turned into a dense net. The men of the white-faced man hadn't reacted yet. On the spot, more than a dozen Dingxiu were strangled by the force of falling from the sky. Bad boss, the guys from Sand Devil's Cave are here. Luhu shouted in exclamation, but before he ran to the white-faced man, he was penetrated by Yanli from the sky. Dripping blood stained his face. The manic sandstorm swept up from the ground, accompanied by a horrible wind, with hundreds of lazy forms, coming from far and near. "Boss, withdraw quickly, we are far from their opponents." The white-faced man slightly jumped in the corner of his eyes, obviously not reconciled. This black spar, which is far more precious than Tianjing, is hundreds to thousands of times. It was already a thing in his pocket, and now he is giving it away. How can he do it? But it wasn't until the figures riding on Huang Sha got closer and closer that the white-faced man finally waved his hand unwillingly. "Withdraw." When he was about to retreat, he reached out again and swallowed nearly 1,000 pieces of Montenegrin crystals before he hurried away. It's really ugly. This group of miscellaneous people dare to find food in our realm. It's really awkward. The yellow sand dissipated, and the hundreds of figures gradually emerged. At the forefront of these figures, a young man dressed in casual clothes and slightly sloppy, looking at those fast-moving figures, snorted at the ground disdainfully. "Brothers, move to me quickly, whoever left a piece and tied the city gate to hang for 10 days. The wandering young man's face was mixed, and with his waved hand, all the 110 men behind him fluttered, thinking on the spar piled up on the hill, began to carry it. A black spar was photographed with a wave of hand, and the young waver raised his eyebrows and smiled. "It's really good. This is all for the elder sister, and it's a big thing. Commander Chui, there are a few people under these crystals." A man reflected, and at the same time, he dragged these figures either buried under the crystals or buried in the yellow sand. A total of 6 bodies, 5 men and 1 woman. When the young man who was called the leader of Chui Tong saw the comatose woman, he couldn't help but shine. Despite being very embarrassed, Huang Sha couldn't hide his soft posture. "Chui Tongling, their identity is unknown, it is still better to contact." The middle-aged man beside the Fanglang youth pulled him at the right time and reminded quietly. "Are you reminded? This commander just wants to find out if they are acting dizzy to prevent unnecessary situations." The Fanglang youth shook the middle-aged man's palm and stepped forward, probing it fakely. From this perspective, he also saw some clues. At present, these 5 men and a woman, and 6 bodies, are all extremely traumatized, almost leaving only 1 breath. Especially a tall, middle-aged man in a broken black jean, wasuit, the whole chest was torn by some terrible force. And from the perspective of these people's clothing, all of them have a sense of dignity and prestige. The most important thing is that he can't see the strength of these people. Where do these suspicious guys come from, and why can it give me a sense of deterrence? Fanglang youth rubbed his chin in the palm, thinking. "Lord Chui, what about these unconscious people?" the middle-aged man reminded in due course. When the Fanglang youth heard the words, he no longer thought, and waved his hand directly. "As long as he is found by us, it belongs to us. They all bring me into the city, and don't let me drop a hair." In the ups and downs, the vast yellow sand became the only main color. Due to too much shaking and bumps, he was forced to slowly open his eyes from the pain. A wisp of pure red light flashed deep in the pupil of the eye, and the stars between the eyebrows began to flow slowly. Chapter 4770. However, the converging force of yen only existed for a moment, and then dispersed completely. Pain comes from the overwhelming pain above the consciousness. Whether it is a consciousness or a source of immortals, or an immortal body, it was destroyed in the fall of the northern celestial state. In the final destruction process, with his own fairy body, he absorbed more than half the breath of destruction, protecting Chengqing, Chuanqiu, and Yinling, so that Jian Wushuang was almost crushed by the general trend. If there is no blood of the ancestor Feng Feng in Feng Qi's body, Rao is a trait of super-perfect chaotic creatures. Although he will not let Jian Wushuang fall, he is enough to let him fall into a long sleep. Feeling that the blood of the ancestor and phoenix in the body gradually dimmed, he knew that at least one more time, the blood of Feng Qi left in his body would disappear completely. Today's swords are unparalleled. Except for their eyes turning, all other parts are in an uncontrolled state of chaos. He forbared the pain of being shattered and split, and the fusion, looking at the whole body and the front. In the wind and sand, this team of hundreds of people is moving forward slowly. I don't know where to go. He wanted to leave, but found that he was tied into a dumpling by a unique chain, lying on the hill-like black mountain crystals, and could not move at all. Qin Qing, Chuanqiu, and others around Jianwushuang, without exception, were all wrapped in dumplings, and were still in a coma, ignorant of where they were. Jian Wushuang wanted to struggle to get up, but the pain from each cell caused him to persevere for a moment before finally passing out. As he closed his eyes saw that in the misty yellow sand, a black giant gate appeared. A slight moan sounded, and then Jian Wushuang woke up from the initial coma. False Qan gushed out from his temples, although it has recovered, but at most it has recovered by 10%, and even the weak dynamism can only be forced to move. This was the heaviest injury since he came to Daanhuan, and almost the immortal body was almost broken. As a result, Jian Wushuang realized Yuba's terrible strength. What a terrible existence! He would have destroyed 2 great Yanxian with a wave of his hand, and shattered the Qingxian source with 1 finger. Is he the supreme power of the same level as the Emperor Zhenliang? There is no answer. What Jian Wushuang can think of is that they escaped from the dead and escaped from Yubo. The cause of death of Gongzi Mo will be completely buried, at least they will not be thoroughly investigated. Slowly spitting out a sigh of breath, Jian Wushuang only realized that his situation was not optimistic at the moment, and he could even describe it as bad. Because the sword at this time was unparalleled, trapped by a rope, and hung high on a wall. Not only him, the sleeping Qin Qing, Chuanqiu and others were all lined up beside him, hanging on the wall without exception. The city wall was made up of something, and on the dark wall, a thick bone spur was exposed abruptly, and it looked extremely ugly. And looking at this side of the sky dome, the red clouds condensed by resentment and blood almost condensed into substance. How much killing is this created to have such a vision? Jian Wushuang has a terrible headache. Since entering this great Yanhuan, he is almost always in a passive situation. Only then left a life from the northern celestial state, and now it is so end. Since the damage had not yet been recovered, he couldn't even move freely, so he had no choice but to hang the rope on his body. Afterwards, Jian Wushuang turned his gaze to his side. Although Qin Qing, Chun Qiu and others were all traumatized to varying degrees, they were far from fatal and the breath tended to be stable. When he looked to the right, he was shocked. That was killed by Yu Bo on the spot, smashing the essence of Xian Yuan. At the moment he was hanged by Jian Wushuang's side with the same posture. Although the breath was slightly inaudible, he was actually alive. It's not good news that Tai Qing didn't die, and it was a big threat to him. Jian Wushuang is already thinking about it. Not only Di Qing, but also a figure wearing a broken armor, also hung on the city wall. Jian Wushuang looked at the reel, and immediately noticed that the figure in the broken armor was the young guard who had held him before, one of the 7 swordsmen. Among these figures, only the most important one is missing, the silver bell with the sky-shaped bone armor. Even at the last moment of the destruction of Xianzhou, Jian Wushuang also took into account the existence of Yin Ling, and protected her, never fell. Now that she is alone, there is only one possibility that he will be taken away by the people in this evil city. At this moment, Qin Qing and Chuanqiu woke up wandering around and looked around dizzily, speechless. Where is this? Have we escaped from the northern celestial state? Qin Qing fainted, and then saw Jian Wushuang beside him, his eyes lit up. Brother Sword, are we dead? Of course not dead. Chuanqiu was extremely weak, but not far from death. It's good to escape, we are all living together this time. Wait, is our location a bit weird now? Who the did we hang us on the city wall? Qin Qing was shocked and twisted his body to get rid of the shackles, but found that he couldn't even make a little effort out. Jian Wushuang said in a timely manner, "Don't waste your energy, recover well, and want to come to those who caught us, and will come out soon." As his words fell, the dusty city gate opened slowly, and a faint smell flew out. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but frown slightly. It seemed that the Fang Tianyu was exactly the same as he had guessed, with a killing intention. As the city gate slowly opened, a team of 8 came out. In the center of the team, 4 people carried a soft bed. Above the soft bed, there was a young boy with disheveled clothes and a loose figure. Needless to say, it must be us who are tied together. Chen Qing looked iron and wished to bleed them on the spot. And Chuanqiu also changed his face and whispered in a low voice, "No, the abstinence is gone." Neiji was given to him by himself when Jian Wushuang and others left the 6-day realm. The storage of the top crystal in Montenegro almost reached the point of terror. The top crystal inside is enough to let the top-strength strongmen in one side of the sky fall into the fight for fighting. The loss right now is an inestimable loss. It must have been taken away by the gang who trapped us. If I waited for Lao Tzu to recover, he would shoot them to death. Chen Qing's teeth creaked, but he was hit hard, and he might face an ancestor. There is no backhand in top repair. Chapter 4771. It seemed that he woke up from his sleep, and the wandering youth lying on the soft bed looked up at the few people on the city wall. "Yo, this has been hanging for more than 10 days and finally woke up, it really made the leader wait," he said, and then took a black crystal with a finger length from his arms, rubbed it in his hands, and looked like a mixed one. Chen Qing left his anger directly, and looked at this as an ancestral vagrancy young man. Even when he said angrily, "You guys have stolen Lao Tzu's stuff, just dare to mock you. Believe it or not, this is gone?" As soon as this remark came out, Jian Wushuang sank in his heart. In this situation, the strength of several of them had not recovered at all. It was impossible to deal with the ancestor-level repair. If you overturn the boat here, it is really drinking. Sure enough, the rogue young man who had a look of beating was suddenly bounced from the soft bed when he heard Chen Qing's binge drinking, and a pair of eyes shot a murderous intention. "Old thing, who do you say is a thief? Believe it or not, this leader pulls your tongue out?" Chen Qing heard the words and smiled disdainfully. He immediately spit at him. "Lao Zi is hanging here, and you never want to hurt me." The Fanglang youth did not say much. When even pulling a real sword from the waist of his follower, he went straight to Chen Qingshu. Jian Wushuang is not worried about this, even if Chen Qing's strength has not been restored, but his body is a solid immortal body. This young man who claimed to be a leader was nothing more than an ancestor-level realm. With the iron in hand, he could naturally cause limited damage to Chen Qing. Sure enough, a sword came out and pierced Chen Qing's chest straight, but he couldn't get in, and even his clothes were not pierced. Seeing this situation, the youth of Fanglang was shocked, and the arrogance in his eyes was reduced by a few points. "Go away, the kid who didn't have all the hair, and dare to deal with you, Chinyi?" Chen Qing said coldly, and at the same time he spit out a spit. Because the distance was so close, the young debauchery took a drool directly. "But Lao Tzu is going to kill you." The wandering young man who came back to God, angered in his mouth, brought up a real sword and slashed Chen Qing. Under such a crazy offensive, although Chen Qing is a fairy, but because of the heavy hit, it can't bear it anymore. "Enough, kid, I'm not a sandbag." Chen Qing tried to avoid it and said angrily. There was only anger left in the eyes of the Fanglang youth, and Jian ran to the deadly place. At this moment, a cold and ethereal female voice resounded from all over the world. "Cui Jings, stop, bring them to see me." Jian Wushuang looked up at the crimson sky dome composed of killing and evil thoughts above his head, and vaguely saw the breath begin to gather towards the city. After hearing this voice, the young Fanglang, who was named Cui Jing, stopped his hands despite his hatred towards Chen Qing. He turned his sword back to his body and gave orders to the entourage he brought. Not long after, Jian Wushuang and others were all led from the wall. The young guard who had been in a lethargy had already woke up, and the cold, killing intention in his eyes looked at Jian Wushuang unabashedly. Jian Wushuang ignored his gaze directly, but looked dignifiedly behind him, the meaning of waking up from the dying state. That kind of momentum enough to destroy ordinary Yenxian thousands of times did not completely kill him. However, judging from his slack breath after he woke up, he was hit harder than Jian Wushuang. In this way, Jian Wushuang does not have to worry about the fact that Di Qing will burst and hurt people. After all, A bird whose beak has been temporarily pulled out will not cause much harm. Under the leadership of Cui Jing, a young wave-riding youth, a group of 5 people, like prisoners, stepped into the evil city in series with each other. The yellow sand is rolling, and in this big city full of ferocious murderous intentions and evil thoughts, the ground is covered with rough stones. This evil city is completely located on a deserted desert. Entering this gate, Jian Wushuang noticed the scene in the city. These large cities are quite similar to the walled city, crisscrossing, and the houses are intertwined. It seems that there is a venerable devil living inside. As some outsiders stepped on, they began to converge with the whole body covered with the evil thoughts of killing karma. Go far away for Lao Tzu. These people are all dedicated to Shanyang. If you have the murderous intention of you, Lao Tzu will kill you. Lying on the soft bed, Cui Jing pretended to be a fierce warning. Those top repairers who stepped forward. After hearing Cui Jing's warning, the more and more top practitioners gathered, and they all stepped back with interest. But there are still those who are reluctant to leave, rubbing their palms and saying, after enjoying Yang, can you reward us with some blood? Cui Jing hung his head from the soft bed again, impatiently. Can it be your turn? All give me honestly to practice in the sea of blood. The top practitioners who gathered around lamented, and then began to leave, but no one ran into Cui Jing. Obviously, this Cui Jing also has a certain influence in this evil city called Sand Devil's Cave. But Qin Qing laughed disdainfully at this and said directly, the debris on the soft bed, hurry down and let Chun Chun sleep on it for a while, neglecting a few of us, be careful to poke your old nest broken. In his heart, he suffocated Qin Qing's unspoken words. Cui Jing looked at him and said fiercely, old things, now you bark, when you're going to cramp your bones, wait for death. A bunch of miscellaneous pieces, why am I afraid? Qin Qing disdained, completely regarded Cui Jing's words as fart. Cui Jing didn't say much. For this guy who was helpless and quite like a hob, he could only avoid his edge. In this way, you reading www.Akanshu. The calm group of 5 people walked slowly in this evil city and walked forward. When the evil city exuding turbidity gradually became scarce, a broad black stone avenue appeared in Jian Wushuang's eyes. At the end of this black stone avenue, which can accommodate 10 horses side by side, is the main hall bordering the crimson sky dome. At the same time, there was a murmur of emptiness, but there was a real howling. Jian Wushuang fixed his eyes and looked forward, and saw that as the black stone avenue under his feet continued to extend forward, the rough sand and stone land had disappeared, replaced by a borderless deep red sea of blood. And the hall bordering the sky is located above the sea of blood. At the same time, all the tragic howling sounds were heard from the deep red sea of blood. Seen from a distance, Black Stone Avenue, the ancient Silence Hall, and the sea of blood with miserable howlings constitute a heart-wrenching purgatory. However, these are only the tip of the most common iceberg in Sand Devil's Cave. Chapter 4772. Cui Jing also stepped out of the soft bed after stepping into the area of the ancient Palace of Silence, looking forward with respect. Feeling the heartbreaking wailing from his ear, Jian Wushuang's indifferent face seemed to have received no influence at all. And Qin Qing and others, with the same indifferent look, didn't care. A monk who has been able to achieve Yenxian realm has never destroyed a side of heaven and spirits for various reasons or starting points. Under these circumstances, they naturally cannot affect their state of mind. The more he moved forward, Jian Wushuang also realized where those wailing sorrows came from. The blood sea underneath this foot was all formed by condensing and imagining the unowned gods and souls of countless creatures. They are tempered all the time and cannot be relieved. For such evil karma beyond killing karma, Yenxian are disdainful, except Yenxian who has practiced evil methods to do so. Jian Wushuang laid a bad label in his heart for the master who had not met yet in this sand cave. Under the guidance of Cui Jing, the dust-closing hall door of the ancient giant palace slowly opened, bleeding gas from the hall. Bring them all in. Cui Jing gave the order and entered the giant hall first. Jian Wushuang and others were also pushed in by several entourages. The hall is cold, the whole ground is made of some kind of crystal with almost transparent material, and you can directly see the deformed ghost in the blood sea. There is not much hidden breath in the giant hall that is almost dim and dull. Only when it is deep in the hall is there a strong breath. Shan Yang Yang, everyone has brought them. Cui Jing converged and looked a little respectfully. With a click, a ghost fire appeared, and then the hall was illuminated. As the hall was illuminated, the mountain-like black mountain crystals piled up, almost filling the entire apse. Jian Wushuang's gaze locked on to the front as soon as possible. There, on one of the cold seats, he slowly walked off a tall figure wearing a large cloak. The looming beautiful body, as she walks, seems to be exposed at any time. At the same time, there was light yellow gravel surging between her hair tips. The deeper facial features were cold, and Jian Wushuang, who slowly glanced at him, waited. In the end, she said, "All of these spars are left by you?" No one spoke. Seemingly anticipating the situation, she spread her palms again, revealing a black ring with a black gloss. From what I have just checked, the crystals in this ring have accumulated to a terrible level. Are you really unclaimed? As her voice fell, a calm voice sounded, "That ring is mine." Face to face, the woman known as Shan Yang raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Why don't you give me something more precious than Tianjing? You think of beauty, do you know the value of the things in it?" Chen Qing sneered. "It's your 10 heavens, you can buy them." After hearing this, Shan Yang asked quietly, "Aren't you monks in this heaven?" "Things can be given to you, just let the 3 of us leave," Jian Wushuang said. "I think the value of these things can be changed for us to leave." "I want things too, but you and I don't want to let go?" Shan Yang smirked. Jian Wushuang kept silent, and the palm behind him was ready to open the Bo Yang bottle at any time. "Do you really think you can eat us? I didn't plan to eat you after all, you brought me such a rich resource." Shan Yang opened her eyes, staring at Jian Wushuang. "Of course I can let you go, but there is a previous premise here. A person and Cui Jing compete, you can leave if you win, as for losing, naturally all have to suffer the deprivation of the soul." After she finished speaking, she looked at Cui Jing again. "Choose one, I just have to win." Cui Jing nodded, then turned to look at the 5 people standing side by side. Although he could not see through the realm of these 5 people, what is certain is that they are all very weak at the moment. Cui Jing first ruled out Chen Qing at the bottom of his heart. After all, this guy who looked like hob meat left him with a big shadow. Then, in turn, he ruled out the murderous intention of Qing and the young guard. In the end, Cui Jing set his sights on Chuanqiu and Jian Wushuang. There was a drop of cold sweat flowing from the sideburns of spring and autumn, who is only an ancestor so far. After being hit hard, his strength was almost reduced to the lowest. If he was selected by Cui Jing, there was no possibility of winning. As for Cui Jing at this time, he didn't think too much. He directly pointed his sword with his finger. "Okay, it's you, come and compare with me." As the so-called persimmons are to be picked softly, this is the unchanging truth. In Cui Jing's view, this is a spoiled clan prince at first glance. It must have been a pile of heavenly treasures. It would be easy to win him. At this time, Chen Qing and Chuanqiu all have a strange look, and it seems that they have foreseen the next ending. The rope restraint on Jian Wushuang's body was then released, which did not limit his activities. "Brother Sword, don't keep your hands later, it's best to kill them directly." Chen Qingmei flirted and said, it seemed a bit impatient. Jian Wushuang reluctantly shook his head. Because he had no weapons at his disposal, he pulled out the real sword around Chen Qing's waist and then moved forward. Although the strength of his body has recovered to less than 10%, and the immortal body has been hit hard, he can still use kendo skillfully. At the beginning, the Divine Universe Palace, and the sword fairy Ding Baiyi's more than 10,000 years of discussion on the sword, laid a solid foundation for his swordsmanship. Even if the sword is folded into a tree, it can exert the power of kendo. Right now, he was standing in the same place as a rock, slowly adjusting his breath, and began to try to establish resonance with the real sword in his hand. Cui Jing, who is on the opposite side, reverted to the previous appearance of letting go of the wave. In his view, this competition will be over in less than 10 breaths. Slowly staring at the eyes, mixes all strength and restrains in the meridians, and the real sword in the sword without hands suddenly looks forward. Cui Jing smiled with a low eyebrow, and from his arms he began to gather a few dragons transformed into Yanli. The battle is on the verge. At this moment, Di Qing was very upset, and a pair of eyes with light gold meaning appeared a murderous opportunity. The feeling that this fate is in the hands of others is what he hates the most. But now he is helpless. After all, Di Qing still underestimated Yu Boss Blow before realizing this situation. He has indeed died once under Yu Boss Men. But no one knew that this life was just one of his 9 hits. However, death sins are exempt, living sins are inescapable, and the pain after rebirth overwhelms everything. Chapter 4773. Right now, even the self-preservation ability is gone. Even in the face of some top repairs, there is no chance of winning. Therefore, he hates the feeling that destiny is in the hands of others. If Jian Wushuang is defeated, they will all be buried together without exception. The purpose of Qing Qing's heartless platform is also a little nervous. You can only use I Cheng force, which is indeed a little trouble for Jian Wushuang, but with a sword in her side, it is more than enough to deal with Cui Jing. Cui Jing had Yan Liu long condensed between his arms, and then his fists suddenly pushed forward. A total of 4 dark yellow dragons ran to the dragon, rising tens of feet in response to the storm. The fangs in the dragon's mouth were bushy. Seeing this situation, Qin Qing and others who seemed to be holding the victory were also a bit nervous. After all, Jian Wushuang suffered the most damage and did not recover at all. The 4 startled dragons with their thick blood, as if walking out of the sea of blood, marching forward. The sword Wushuang moved, and he suddenly retreated half a step, protruding the real sword in his hand, and whispered from the tip of the sword. At the same time, layers of water rippled, violently escaping from the tip of the sword, blocking all the rushing blood. But this kind of sword intention could not stop Cui Jing's offensive. Several dark yellow galloping dragons shredded the ripples directly, all opening the dragon mouth with strange teeth, facing the sword Wushuang pocket bite. But while Jian Wushuang retreated earlier, his figure did not stay. Instead, he lifted his sword and ran away without any awareness of confrontation. Looking at this scene, everyone was frowning and looking strange. Although it is understandable to avoid its edge, it is too unsightly to turn around and run. Upon seeing this, Cui Jing was even more excited. He used to be cautious and solemn, and began to disdain. It seems that this soft persimmon is really right. A total of 4 dark yellow benlongs failed to swallow the sword Wushuang and crashed on the ground. Cui Jing stepped forward, his right hand condensed from Yanli into an 8-foot stick, rounded and smashed forward. Sword Wushuang, with his sword running, walked directly around the temple pillar. Hidden heads and tails of the rat generation, you are about to fight against your grandfather Cui. Cui Jingbao smiled with a stick and smashed the temple pillar into the pit. Jian Wushuang didn't care about him. It seemed that he had no idea of playing against him. Both are in this ancient silence hall. You chase me up. Qin Qing and others all squeezed a lot of sweat, and Di Qing was even more nervous. He didn't want to die after reincarnation. It was the hatred of the young guard who looked at Jian Wushuang's face and seemed to wish him to be sacked on the spot. Damn guy, I just hate that I can't destroy you by myself now. The young guard whispered, when I recover, it's your death. Sitting back on the throne again, Shan Yangyang gazed calmly at the battle like a farce, without a word. In her right palm, I don't know when to hold a scepter wrapped in light blood. At the very top of this scepter, it was a sensational skull. The skull was shining and infiltrated with blood all the time, as if it might be bleeding at any time, and it was alive. The cause and effect of such a woman with a massacre is quite terrible. Even if it is ordinary Yenxian, she will never want to contact her. Moreover, the top repair under her seat is also extremely depraved, killing innocent creatures, has already been impregnated with uncausable cause and effect and mass murder. The so-called massacre is a mysterious cause and effect that nobody can detect, and it is almost impossible to eliminate it. When carrying a large murder, it means that there is a crack in the heart, which is fatal to Yen Xian and untouchable. And these were all noticed by Jian Wushuang the first time he set foot in this sand cave. So he is restraining himself, trying his best not to be contaminated by these causes and effects. Cui Jing chased behind him, eager to win. Jian Wushuang turned around from time to time to fight one or two, and then continued to swim, little by little provoke Cui Jing's anger. "Rat, I caught you and will drown you in the sea of blood." He was angry, although his strength was adjusted to the peak, but it was like hitting cotton, and he could not start. Jian Wushuang didn't smell the noise at all. When Cui Jing ran with his 8-foot stick, he suddenly raised his sword and probed, leaving a long mark directly on the clothing in front of his chest. Although Cui Jing was already prepared, he was too late to dodge and was almost injured by the real sword. He was shocked by the cold sweat, and then became more angry, releasing Yanli and slamming towards the sword. The whole ancient lonely palace shivered, and a huge pillar was shattered by Cui Jing. Jian Wushuang's figure flickered, and finally he shot extremely obscurely. The sword in his hand was clear, his sword burst forth and strangled away. In fact, the most fundamental reason why Jian Wushuang has never shot is to be careful not to get caught with that inexplicable cause and effect. Although the killing of Cui Jing was much less than that of the rest of the sand cave, it was still full-bodied. Once contaminated by the massacre, unless there is supreme supernatural power to resolve, otherwise it can only go on again and again. When Jian Wushuang is in the weakest position at this time, if one step is wrong, it will be difficult to reverse. Right now, avoiding is inevitable. He shot directly. 3,000 swords swept across and carried the trend towards Cui Jing. Seeing this, Cui Jing smiled disdainfully, reached out and turned into a force enchantment to resist, and at the same time cast a steady cast on Jian Wushuang. He stood on the spot, with a black robe rising from the wind, his face calm. Soon, the rushing Cui Jing had no reason to panic. He was faintly aware that something was wrong. It seems that to confirm the idea in his heart, the 3,000 swordsmanship swept away in a flash, seemingly unbearable, but it easily broke Cui Jing's Yanli enchantment, and then cut it off. He was horrified, and he protected his head without thinking. Dust swept through the hall, and the top repairers who stood on both sides were horrified. This kind of sword intention is so pure that it is not doped with any force, but with an impeccable trend. They feel that no one can resist this sword. Sword intention galloped, completely wrapped Cui Jing's figure. At this moment, in the eyes of Jianqing looking at Jian Wushuang, there is a more meaningful meaning. Shan Yangyang sat on the throne and raised her eyebrows at him. Thousands of swordsmanship, come quickly and go quickly, everything is just instantaneous. When the sword was completely dissipated, a ragged figure appeared. This is only 3,000 swordsmanship, and Cui Jing's underpants are completely removed. He was unscathed, but his clothes were barely shredded. This is an unbearable shame, and it is impossible for him, the leader of the Sand Devil Cave, to endure it. In this sand cave, face is far greater than life, not to mention his self-confessed leader. Chapter 4774. Cui Jing was so angry that he roared and flew towards Jian Wushuang again. This time, he no longer dodges and engages with the sword. Jian Wushuang, who had already controlled Jian Yi to Miao Zhihao, had been confident that as long as Cui Jing was not dedicated to death, he would not be hurt. The more he fought, the more Cui Jing was frightened. Although he was eager to win, he was not a reckless generation. How could he not be able to detect the unparalleled sword he was fighting with, and he did not use the force at all, relying on a real sword in his hand. Back and forth. What kind of strength is this to achieve this step? The real sword continued to stab, pushing Cui Jing back step by step. At the same time, Jian Wushuang suddenly committed himself, changed the hilt, and suddenly pulled the blade of the real sword in his hand. There was a pain in the abdomen, and then Cui Jing's whole body flew out and fell heavily on the ground. Suddenly, under the ground of transparent material, thousands of evil ghosts were freed from the sea of blood, all screaming and attached to the transparent stone slab, as if waiting for food. Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly frowned, and he stepped back slightly. Cui Jing covered his chest and sat up from the ground, looking at him with a complex look. He understood that this situation, which seemed to be resisted by the chamber, was an illusion, and Jian Wushuang did not even exert his full strength from beginning to end. He lost in this way, both inexplicably and as if already doomed. There was silence in the hall, and at that moment, the change came quietly. With Jian Wushuang as the center, the ground suddenly cracked, and the fine cracks directly spread over half the hall. Then it collapsed. The speed of the collapse was so fast that no one responded. Jian Wushuang even brought Chen Qing and others, and all fell into the sea of blood with the gravel. Cheers of countless evil spirits are like a carnival feast, lying on them layer by layer, dragged into the depths of the blood sea. Looking at the collapsed ground in front of him, Cui Jing looked back subconsciously. Shan Yangyang did not know when she had come behind him, holding a skull scepter, and calmly watching the sea of blood churning under the pothole. "Big sister, are they all right?" Cui Jing swallowed his throat. She didn't speak. After a while, she slowly turned around. "Half the time of the column, I dragged them up again and placed them in the walled city." Cui nodded, although she didn't know what she intended to do, but ordered to do the same. Ban's Huxiang's time is not long, but there are also short periods of time. Cui Jingning watched the movements in the sea of blood in preparation for pulling Jian Wushuang and others in an emergency. At this moment, the boundless blood sea is tumbling, and the extreme blood gas is transformed into ghosts. Like a predatory fish, Jian Wushuang and others who have fallen into the blood sea are suppressed. The cause and effect and the massacre that he tried to avoid were all swarming in the end. Looking into the eyes, it was full of extreme blood red, and there were 5 people in the sword Wushuang, all of which were helpless and could only helplessly float in the blood sea. If the strength is not damaged, these grievances will not erode them alone. But right now, even if Qing Qing is helpless, he is really reincarnation, and today's strength is even worse than spring and autumn. Giant monsters mixed with evil thoughts stretched out their palms from the depths of the blood and dragged them into the bottom of the sea little by little. The sea of blood also boiled from the initial tumbling, and gradually calmed down. As soon as Ban's Huxiang's time passed, Cui Jing jumped alone on the sea of blood, looking at the scene like a ruin in front of him, and he waved his hand. Immediately, the blood sea was separated by a sky. The ugly giant monster transformed from countless evil thoughts and evil spirits emerged from the sky. The palms of more than 10 feet in size slowly spread out, and Jian Wushuang and others who had been comatose appeared in Cui Jing's eyes. What are these guys? Although they all look so weak, why do they have a breathtaking momentum? Cui Jing frowned, and the confrontation with Jian Wushuang not long ago clearly left him very impressed. Aren't they also monks who don't belong to this continent? Or are they just like the bald men, visitors from outside the world? Cui Jing waved his hands and ingested Jian Wushuang and others in the palm of the evil thought monster. He carefully explored it and found no useful news before carrying them away. The whole piece went back to the sea of blood and returned to a miserable state. The blood red, enough to erode the heart's blood, spreads over and infects everything. This kind of negative influence is full of evil thoughts, despair, death, resentment. Even if Yenxian is inadvertently infested, it will be infected with inexplicable cause and effect, and murder. Jian Wushuang suddenly sat up from the ground, sweating and sweating at the temples. Looking into the eyes, the sea of blood is not there, only a quiet blue stone road. Just now, are you still in that sea of blood? Why now? Is it an illusion? After investigating the fusion of inner strength and the outside world, Jian Wushuang determined that this was not an illusion. He stood up slowly, standing on this blue stone slab road where only 2 people could go side by side, looking around. The hazy sky dome shows a smoky cyan haze after rain. On both sides of this bluestone road, all are deep waters where the lotus bud has just been extracted. From the perspective of the eyes, the hazy distance and the deep waters are connected. There is an indescribable connotation and illusion. And Jian Wushuang stood in the middle of this bluestone road, in front of and behind him, unknown where to go. Everything here is silent to the extreme, as if it were a painting, full of unrealism. But his face was still calm, and after a moment of thinking, he took a step and moved slowly. Somehow, a long wind blew up, blowing the lotus leaves on the deep waters on both sides. At this time, the lotus is not yet open, and the huge lotus bud is almost sinking on the water. Jian Wushuang walked slowly during this time. There was something weird in my heart. He dared to be sure that this scene at the moment is the most weird place he has come to since his practice. This strangeness is not facing the horror of life and death, or the powerlessness of an irresistible enemy, nor the unknown fear. It is a kind of strange discomfort caused by a subtle place that is very different from cognition. It's like a nightmare in that long time ago, or a muddled whisper in a serious illness. This kind of place should not really exist, or that this kind of place is transformed by the mind. Jian Wushuang kept his voice, although his heart had already understood a bit, but still walking slowly as before. Under this strange and hazy sky dome, there is only a blue stone slab road extending to the infinite distance. On the deep and bitter cold water, the desolation and loneliness reached the extreme. Chapter 4775. There was no more than 100 steps forward, and a silver bell chuckled, ringing from the waters of Shino, and from far and near, finally condensed behind Jian Wushuang. Then a boneless palm lined lightly on his shoulder. "Why do you walk so fast? You can't wait for me." Jian Wushuang didn't turn back when he heard the words, but moved forward with care for himself. "Okay, don't mess with you anymore, your elm head is really boring." After the silver bell-like voice fell, a petite figure wearing a green shirt and a lot of clothes walked briskly over him and walked forward. Jian Wushuang regarded her as having nothing, still walking slowly. "Hey, can't you really wait for me? Can you think about my feelings?" The petite figure tweeted, chattering like a bird, and seemed extremely dissatisfied with the behavior of Jian Wushuang. "Tell you, even if you don't like this girl, there are so many people who like this girl. Who do you think you are?" The petite figure didn't nearly yell at him, just like a little beast. Although he was extremely angry, he was helpless. "I saved you, and you should take care of me as I should. Anyone who doesn't do aftercare work, people often say that the Buddha is sent to the West. The girl let you take care of it." Like she didn't see Jian Wushuang's indifference, she was still talking tirelessly. "It's so coincident that you don't like meat and I don't like it, what? You mean you don't like boiled meat, but you like to eat barbecue? Have you quit the meat and herd?" Petite body akimbo no, he pointed his finger at him. Just a short journey of more than 1,000 steps, Jian Wushuang seemed to be a little unbearable, and he finally looked to his side. Then quietly said, "Your obsession is really persistent, can you chatter against a stranger?" And that petite figure seemed to have heard nothing about Jian Wushuang, and after losing his temper, he started talking again. "It's so beautiful. Look here, isn't it beautiful? We will live here later, okay? Here, build a thatched house. You concentrate on practice, I will accompany you every day, plant a lot of lotus." The petite figure dreamed so much that it stopped at the same place. And Jian Wushuang also stopped at this time, calmly said, "You are just obsessed, let's disperse, don't delay me on the way." Her eyes suddenly dimmed and then turned red. Originally silent into the weird waters, it began to churning, and everything seemed to be fading, turning gray and white. "Follow me, okay?" She reached out and tried to grasp sword warriors, but nothing helped. She was collapsing and vanishing along with the bluestone road and deep water. On the verge of breaking down, the lotus on the whole deep water is in full bloom. With the full lotus buds blooming, there is a slap-sized Senran skull in each flower. In the dark, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. That kind of scene, the unbelievable dialogue, disappeared, replaced by sounding sounds after another. Jian Wushuang sat up and noticed that he was now in a spacious pavilion. At the same time, he raised his arm again, and when he saw the weak but solid cobweb bloodlines on his arm, his mood fell to the bottom. This is to show that he has been infected with the cause and effect of the complaint, as well as the killing. Everything was too baffling. He tried his best not to contaminate himself, but eventually fell into the blood and became contaminated. This is by no means a good thing. If you are not careful, it will be an irreparable rift to his later state of mind, or to practice spiritually. Chen Qing, Chuanqiu and others all lay beside him and fell asleep. After being investigated by Jian Wushuang, they were obviously more or less contaminated with these causes and consequences. Except for these two persons, the Qing sleeping on the outermost side of the bed was less contaminated. At the same time, there is a woman who is curled up and sleeping on the side of Jian Wushuang. Wait, woman? His mind woke up immediately, and he hurriedly reached out to curl up the sleeping woman beside him and adjusted his figure. But to his disappointment, this woman was not Yin Ling, but a heroic woman she had never seen before. Although this woman is not beautiful, her full face is still very recognizable. Jian Wushuang's gaze looked down. From the woman's broken armor, she looked like the young guard who had held him in the northern celestial state before. Isn't it all popular to dress up as men now? Once again, this heroic woman was determined. It was after the young guard, Jian Wushuang was a little depressed. It seemed that he was being watched, and at that moment, the heroic woman slowly opened her eyes. The eyes are opposite, perhaps the strangeness in his eyes is seen, and the heroic woman unconsciously touched her cheek. Don't touch it, I see it clearly. Jian Wushuang said softly. I killed you. She broke up without warning, raising her palm to look at his neck. Jian Wushuang could make her do what she wanted, and raised her hand directly to resist, but after seeing a few tricks, she completely subdued it. Because the strength in the body still didn't recover, now the pure struggle is physical strength, and Jian Wushuang naturally overwhelmed her easily. Although I don't know what is wrong between you and me, you have to figure out that the person who killed them is not me. Jian Wushuang released her and said in a deep voice. The heroic woman didn't do anything anymore. After taking a deep look at him, she got up and walked out of the door. Lie back on the bed again, Jian Wushuang began to think back to the strange dreamy place in his sleep, and the silver bell that disappeared from the sky. The sky-shaped bone armor in Yinling's hand was their sole purpose for this operation. If she disappeared, everything would be meaningless. As he recalled everything that had happened, a desolate and reckless horn sounded suddenly from outside the pavilion. Jian Wushuang turned over and got out of bed, pushed open the window, and explored the situation outside. Almost at the same time, in a big city in this sand demon cave, as the noise rang out, Shui Jing, with his naked upper body flying out of it, stood in midair. His mother, it must be the bald donkeys who are heartbroken. Shui Jing hated, stretched out his hands and tightened his trouser belt. He led more than 100 people to repair, and ascended towards the head of Shamo Cave. With the departure of Shui Jing, soon afterwards, countless top practitioners, like ants, began to walk out of any corner of the Sand Devil's cave, and then all gathered to go to cover the sky and cover the sun. Chapter 4776. Within the entire territory of the Sand Devil's cave, the top repairs in any of the walled villages came out. What's wrong with this? Who are they going to fight with? Chen Qing opened his sleepy eyes and came behind Jian Wushuang. Thick bursts of blood, accompanied by the raging sand, almost covered all visible objects. He nodded and said, It looks like there will be a big dogfight at the meeting. Chen Qing immediately came to the spirit. Then we can escape without chaos? Jian Wushuang did not speak again. If it was earlier, this impending chaos is the best time to escape, but the situation is now different. They are all contaminated with that inexplicable cause and effect. If they leave now, their future practice will inevitably be troubled in some key nodes, or even stop. No one wants to plant such a deadly seed in later practice. But the way to resolve this cause and effect, and the killing, is to let Jian Wushuang do nothing. He doesn't know how to resolve it. If he leaves resolutely, he may never find a way to resolve it. Immediately he told Chen Qing these quickly. Chen Qing listened and hurriedly opened the robe sleeves. He could not help but swallow his throat when he saw a thin bloodline in the arm meridian. What kind of luck is it when it fell in that sea of blood? It was contaminated with cause and effect. So we can't leave now. Once we leave, it will be more difficult in the future. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Now, we must find a solution to it as much as possible. Chapter 4777. The solemn monk of Baoxiang tried his best to suppress the mouthful of cursing and scolding, and his eyes glared like bronze bells, and he wished to strip the fellows of Sand Devil's Cave. Don't make a fuss. The monk of the air wheel frowned slightly, and he was silent for a while. At this moment, a mixed voice came from the head of the Sand Devil Cave. Hello. Those bald donkeys with hidden heads and tails, why are you coming to trouble with your grandpa again? Do you want them to loosen your bones? Baoxiang's solemn monk heard the words and immediately said, Come on, my brother will go back as soon as I go, and teach the unrestrained beast. The empty wheel monk said again, Be clear, don't be reckless. At this time, the old sword-backed elder of the immortal wind walked forward and said, Senior Master, let me go with Jianqing Immortal Master. The destruction of Nasha Demon Cave is also for the benefit of hundreds of millions of souls. The empty wheel monk heard the words, but did not make a statement. There was another net monk who came forward to give a courteous speech. Brother, the rules are no longer meaningful to them. Since we came here last time, the blood here is nearly 10 times richer. Obviously, they slaughtered again. Countless lives. If we don't impose any punishment again, I'm afraid that this side of the heavens will be caught in blood robbery. What the old bald donkeys are talking about, why can't they still do it? Said the wall of the Sand Devil Cave, with an ugly and vicious valiant impatiently repaired. Cui Jing glared at him, and then said in a deep voice, All of them muttered to Lao Tzu and waited. This time, if anyone chops off a bald donkey's head, he will appreciate the blood pool. As soon as these words came out, the walls of the city became restless again, and all the top repairs were glorious, which was already a bit impatient. What's the situation? It seems that they are really going to fight. Several figures quietly squeezed against the wall. Chen Qing touched his forehead and stared at the distant army with his eyes wide. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and looked through the red haze to the monks standing in front of the army. Everything has two sides, life and death, and heir and surplus. The resentment of the creatures in this Sand Devil Cave has already been so heavy that it cannot be resolved, and there will inevitably be a side to it. Will these monks represent the extremes on the other side? Perhaps this is an opportunity to unravel their inexplicable cause and effect. The light flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and he was waiting, moving. Inside the Sand Devil Cave city, the evil veiled the sky, and the sky, flying up, seemed to be about to suppress the riots, rushed out of the city, and shattered all the assembled troops. Cui Jing was already impatient, and the 8-foot stick in his hand kept hitting the ground. At this moment, the monks standing in front of the Black Pressure Army suddenly came out of the air. Cui Jingshan, please listen to the old rules. Bao Xiang solemnly discerned the monk, forced his discomfort in his heart, and spoke against his heart. Cui Jing, who was far away from the wall, heard a grin. Good mother, brothers, all rushed up to me and shred them. When ordered, a bloodthirsty excitement of a mountain tsunami rushed to the sky. Isn't it, playing so hastily? All of Jian Wushuang couldn't believe it. Cui Jing is a crazy dog. The top repair of the black pressure to cover the sky and the sun, as if to break the shackles, like the wolf with the same head, rushed out of the Sand Demon Cave city. Like the revolving muddy black river, several monks who came to do useless instructions saw all their faces, and then folded their hands together to make a static state. Thousands of treasures are coming, dispersing the eroded blood. And the monk Jianqing was almost indignant with blood and anger, and the good-for-nothing mother who had no head and no brain almost ignited his hot temper almost instantly. Good beast, The poor monk will definitely want you to destroy everything. Jian Qing stepped on the stream cloud straight up, and his tooth-white gown was hunted by the strong wind. Brothers, help me! A total of 4 wamangs emerged from the palms of the 4 monks behind Jian Qing, and they merged into a hongqiao, which led away. Jian Qingbao was very strict, his palms were folded together, and he faced the dark and turbulent river, remembering the law. Vientian promise, no prowess. Above a huge rainbow bridge, between the world and the world trembling, a giant white dragon with 4 horns emerged. Under that white dragon, Jian Qing showed a wrathful Vajra trend, and he drove forward the law. The heavens and the earth are trembling, and the Hei Bailong opens a huge mouth, carrying the general trend of the heavens and the earth, and facing thousands of repairs. The two collided, and an unparalleled giant on erupted. At this moment, the earth was torn apart, the mad sand fell silent, and poured into the earth's center. The muddy black river was suddenly cracked by the respectable dragon. Countless ferocious Dingxiu fell from the sky dome, but it was already seriously injured. In the same way, the white dragon treasure is also broken, and the monk who looks at the iron blue is unafraid, holding a black iron scepter, rushing into the Sand Devil camp for a while, and destroying it. The army assembled by the 87 denominations could not hold back at this moment. The old man of the Xianfeng Daogu suddenly pulled out his true sword and pointed directly at the sky dome, destroying the Sand Demon Cave and opening up an avenue for my future generations to practice. Yu Yin stirred the sky. At this moment, the 87 sect, more than 16,000 top repairs, against the Sand Devil Cave, battle. The black and white clash, the fierce fighting broke out. The long wind wailed, Ding Xiu died constantly and then fell. They are all in this vast world, the most shocking and talented genius in each side of the sect, with the brightest spiritual avenue. But in the battle with Sand Devil's Cave, the continuous destruction and death. In the field of such sand caves, the assembled top repairers are more or less affected by their strength. The broken corpse, like the rain, fell on the ground. At the moment on the city wall, Jian Wushuang's complexion was somewhat dignified. When this kind of melee broke out, those 10 monks were already blocked at the forefront, and they fought together with the top repairers of Sand Devil's Cave. And Jian Wushuang wants to be close to them, there is no way at all. Even if his strength recovers to the peak, he will break into this melee and resolutely suffer a little carelessness, not to mention that he is still unable to manipulate his strength. Aren't there any other ways? Jian Wushuang was silent, thinking at the same time how to approach quickly in the bottom of his heart. The strength of these monks is not decent, and they are all in the immortal realm. Naturally, in this melee, there is no downfall, and the ordinary Dingxiu cannot get close at all. Under their leadership, the assembled Zhongmen side, although seriously injured, showed a flat push, pushing towards the wall little by little. Chapter 4778. There are nearly hundreds of monks who have made great repairs in the exhibition of Wuwei. It seems that they are not like monks at all. With the waving of the caduceus in his hand, every stroke can reinvent the digital repair. Senior brother, don't make too many killings. The monk Jingmian waved and defeated the number of rushing to the top repair, and reminded Jianqing anxiously. You have to take care of it. I'm so afraid of this kind of killing karma. I won't be at ease in one day when these wicked beasts will not be destroyed. The noodle monk shook his head helplessly. How could he listen to what his brother, even the master, dared to rebel against? The battle is in full swing. The lives of the ancestors have become the least valuable existence. Countless broken treasures and real swords have fallen into the collapsed and cracked ground with their respective masters. Here, they became the common ground. Fierce wars always resonate, even though they are Yenxian. In the battle situation of the nearly 20,000 or 30,000 top repairs, the role they can play is also very small. The hot-eyed Cui Jing stretched out his hands and tightened his trouser belt, and then carried the 8-foot stick and flew forward. However, Cui Jing, who is the ancestor of the top level, is blessed with the blood in the field of the Sand Devil Cave, which is enough to fight against ordinary Yenxian. Don't you feel that the guy's head is a bit uncomfortable, and it's a second-hand thing? Looking at Cui Jinjiwan's back, Chen Qing commented. Chuanxiu touched his chin and said, "It's a little too clever. It's probably because I'm used to walking in this evil ground, and I need to be beaten." Jian Wushuang still did not speak. He was watching the situation quietly. At the same time, he had a hunch that the top demons of Sand Devil Cave looked fierce, but they could not hold Sand Devil Cave absolutely, and it was definitely a matter of time before the city was broken. At that time, it may be possible to wait for the opportunity to approach those monks. The cause and effect and the killing carried on the body, although seemingly unharmed, may never be triggered, but this is like a barb Jian Wushuang will inevitably try to pull out. If these monks have no way to deal with this, then he can only wait to restore his strength, and then try to unite with the Qing as much as possible to completely wipe out the whole domain. Jian Wushuang has never been an excessively good person. From the beginning of the minute, to the boarding of the eternal God, and then to entering the Dian Huan alone, the criterion that has been quoted is the principle. One of the heavens inflicted harm on him. This is because, if there is a cause, it will be the result, and the end of the destruction is also necessary. To discern the monk, the tactics in his hand are repeated, and the continually appearing top practitioners are forced to retreat. The 10 monks who are all Yenxian already have a tendency to control the battle situation. But among the 10 monks, one did not make a shot, or to be precise, he did not participate in the battle among them. He was like an ascetic monk. After experiencing the vicissitudes of the eyebrows, he walked slowly as if invincible. Occasionally he attacked him, but he was forced to retreat by Qinghui Huang, who was surrounded by him. 10 Yenxian monks, against the Sand Demon Cave where Yenxian almost does not exist, are crushed. Originally incomparable, the crazy repairers of the Sand Devil Cave retreated after the festival, and the number was reduced from more than 20,000 to more than half. If it weren't in the murderous realm, the casualties were even worse than they were now. Jian Qing is like a furious bull. As soon as Cui Jing joined the battle, he directly locked him, and then he fought against the black iron Zen stick. In just 10 breaths, Cui Jing was weak, and he secretly complained at the bottom of his heart, and the palm of his hand holding the 8-foot stick was slightly cracked. "Good evil, Grandpa will send you to death today." With a deep sip, Jian Qing changed his posture, showing the tendency of mountain to catch the moon. He carried the black iron scepter on his shoulder, and then a meteor fell and heaved heavily on Cui Jing's belly. At this moment, he only felt the darkness in front of him, and the 8-foot stick was bent to a strange position, and the whole person flew out like a cannonball. Boom! Jian Wushuang only felt a sudden tremor under the city wall, and then a burst of subtle collapse sounded. Cui Jing's entire figure was completely embedded in the city wall a few meters deep, almost bombarding the city wall out of a large hole. "Ah, dead bald donkey, Lao Tzu, and you are not finished." Cui Jing struggled to pull his body out of the hole in the wall, and his bones seemed to fall apart. Just as the Zhongmen assembled with Jianqing headed up and overwhelmingly overwhelmed, a unique aura came to the battlefield again. The sand ran wild, and the sky was chaotic. From the broken ground, a huge colossal sand colossus was quietly raised. Then, facing the army of Jianxiu headed by Jianqing, the two sides covered their palms and fell down. Jianqing suddenly raised his head. He was horrified, and he raised his Zen stick to stop it. But beyond the imagination's great power, he directly flew over 100 top repairers, including him. For a time, the disadvantaged situation was contained. Fly upside down for hundreds of feet of identification, stand in the air and hold his footsteps, and then can't bear to shed a ray of blood from the corner of his mouth. That kind of momentum was so powerful that it was difficult for him to resist with all strength. At this moment, all the eyes of Ding Xiu were converged on the huge giant sand colossus. Every top repairer in Sand Devil's Cave showed a fanatical expression. On the forehead of the mad sand colossus sits a tall woman with a beautiful figure looming under the big cloak. With a cold face, she waved her hands, and then manipulated the crazy sand giant under her to kill more than 10 top repairers. Jian Wushuang, who had watched this scene from afar, couldn't help but gaze. The sand nymph, who is also not at the level of immortality, showed at this moment, but gave him a sense of detachment. If the former Shan Yangyang and Chen Qing are at the peak of Yanxian at most, then at this moment she seems to have taken that step. However, the next scene is still shocking. The colossal sand colossus waved the sky and covered his palms against all the enemies, but at the next moment, a gigantic size that could not be ignored emerged. A pair of thin palms exuding hundreds of thousands of strands of radiance, with their hands folded together, covered the palms of the colossal sand colossus. The two collided, falling endless sand lime. On the skinny palms of each other, every fine crack is easily visible, exuding a general trend. Jian Wushuang's true look, this kind of magnificent style, is exactly the old monk with a beard that he has never shot since the beginning of the melee. On the black ring between the neck, a strange huamang began to radiate. Chapter 4779. His elaborate upper body, under his tough yellow skin, was surging with unimaginable purity. A total of 14 black and shining ring beads, the clear and bright huamang that escaped, blocked all grudges, evil thoughts, and monstrous blood. Above the head of the empty wheel monk, the pair of occult giant palms emerged from one side of the black mysterious light wheel. After blocking the wanton offensive of the giant sand giant, they retreated on their own. At this moment, the battlefield that had originally fought against Zhen Tian fell into a brief silence. Time seems to be stagnant. The empty wheel monk shot, and as soon as he shot, he met the sand maiden who manipulated the colossal sand giant. Jian Qing and others backed away and came to him quickly. "Brother, you are finally willing to take action." Jian Qing gasped. Obviously under the blow just now, he was seriously injured. The empty wheel withdrew his palms, and he looked forward with clear and smooth eyes. Sitting on top of the colossal sand colossus, Shan Yangyang also looked at him directly. A sneer appeared in the corner of her mouth. The next moment, she raised her arm and pointed to the front. The sky dome suddenly cracked and collapsed, and the condensed blood gas turned into a terrible vortex, spinning. At the same time, an ugly face condensed by the blood of countless grievances came out of the vortex and gnawed towards the empty wheel and others. The atmosphere of terror has crushed more than 100 miles. All Zhongmendingxiu who fought with swords were shocked to see this scene. "Brother!" Jian Qing and others all looked at the empty wheel. The empty wheel responded, and his body was full of brilliance. He took one directly from the bead string between his necks and raised his hand into the air. Suddenly, the ring of beads rose 1,000 feet in response to the storm, and the bead burst out of the plume of Chinese ons, with cumbersome and obscure cipher text, surging in the bead. When the two collided, the ugly face that shook thousands of miles screamed and began to shatter. Countless grudges are tearing and fleeing, trying to escape from the Buddha's light, but they are all being absorbed. Blood gas was decreasing at a rate that was visible to the naked eye, and was eventually included in the ring. Between the world and the earth again stirred up fighting. "This girl is really energetic. I'm afraid the strength is not below me." On the city wall, Qin Qing nodded affirmatively. "If the strength has not been restored, I would like to go up and rush a few times." Jian Wushuang did not speak. Their current situation is extremely dangerous if they rush into a dogfight. Whether it's Shan Yangyang or the 10 monks, they can easily inflict heavy damage on them now. If it were not for investigating the situation, he would not risk leaving anyway. Now they can only watch the changes. Di Qing and the heroic woman dressed as a young guard have also come to the city wall, all with arms folded, watching the battle. At this time, there were only 5 of them on the entire city wall. Although everyone looked very weak, but in the face of such a battle close to more than 30,000 top repairs, they did not have any fear, even seemed to be in watch the same. But it is these 5 people. In fact, everyone has enough strength to stir up the ups and downs. In fact, each superior is not only open to his own strength, of course, but also has vision, so they show no fear. In this period of time, Jian Wushuang had already made a good decision. No matter whether the final battle situation or not, He had to meet the monk who could resist the court with Shan Yangyang. Because in the midst, he saw each other. After accumulating more than 1,000 miles of grievances in the ring, the empty will raised his hand to recover it, and then reconnected it between his necks. With a stick of digital flying repair, Cui Jing quickly rushed to the side of Shan Yangyang. "Sister, do you want to kill this group of bald donkeys?" Cui Jing said cruelly. He was drowned with blood, attacked by treasure, but he didn't care, just like a demon rushing from the sea of blood. Shan Yangyang waved a big wave, and the colossal sand colossus underneath was crushed forward. She said, "Everyone will be expelled, and if there are rebels, they will be captured and imprisoned in the blood." After saying the sentence, her figure rushed out directly, carrying the general trend, and brought down countless blood rain. In the world of Sand and Devil Cave, she is the supreme existence. Although it is the strength of the peak of Yanxian, it is enough to make Wanzong in this entire heaven terrified. With the blood rain falling from her figure, all the Zongmen Dingxiu, who was contaminated, felt an unbearable burning pain, and the soul seemed to be burned. Naturally, their overflowing dynamism is also dying at a rate visible to the naked eye. The evil repairs in the Sand Devil's Cave were not affected at all, in groups of 3 to 5, tearing everything in front of them. Looking at such a scene, Konglin's eyes showed pity. The 9 monks beside him, led by Jian Qing, sang the scriptures at this moment. There is a clear trend, and the Honging Lotus Bridge is built up from the sky and the earth to directly disperse the blood rain. The thick and unresolved blood gas spontaneously retreated when facing the Honging Lotus Bridge by the culture, and the world was clear and clear. The Zongmen Dingxiu, who are resisting hard, only feel that all negative influences have been expelled, and even with their internal strength, they are constantly recovering. For a time, the war started again. Looking at the rushing figure, at this moment the empty wheel monk no longer stayed, bare feet, stepped on the Rainbow Shadow Lotus Bridge, the Zen clothes tied around his waist swayed with the wind. "You shouldn't step here again and forget how I said I let you go?" A pair of tall figures also stood on the Honging Lotus Bridge, and Yin Hong's blood was spread out, gradually dyeing those flowing scriptures to blood red. The empty wheel monk stopped and gave one-handed salutes. The old deceased nature never forgot the admonition of the good men, but it still came. "My purpose for this time is still to persuade the good men to turn back and never create a killing karma." Do you know the last warning that year? Sha Niangnig frowned slightly, and a blood blade had condensed between her palms. "Don't forget," the empty wheel monk said, "if you step on the sand cave again, the body of the Buddha will suffer cramps and bones thousands of times, and the heart of the Buddha will suffer from the worms." Her voice was cold. "Why do you dare to come again?" "Because the old man only wants to give it a try. Even if there is only such a possibility, he will not hesitate." The empty wheel stepped forward, and there was a flow of scripture between his brows and hearts. "If I win, a good person only needs to listen to me for 10 days. If I fail, I will fall into darkness forever and live on flesh and blood." Another prophecy adds body. "Seeing light is dying, seeing the wind is rotten, seeing the ground is hurting, seeing all creatures suffers from the knife." The empty will made 4 bitter words for himself, taking the oath of heaven and earth, and turning back. "Can a good man?" He lowered his eyebrows with a warm smile in his clear eyes. The 4 bitter words of the empty wheel were sworn to the avenue, and the sound circulated under the sky. Chapter 4780. At this moment, all Zongmen Dingxiu, 9 monks, looked up at the scene above the Honging Lotus Peak. Jian Wushuang and others naturally heard the empty wheel's oath, and the emotions in their eyes were different. Jian Wushuang's eyes are respect, Chen Qing is puzzled, spring and autumn is doubt, and Qing Qing is sneering. As for the heroic woman, it is also respectful. To testify, it is extremely painful to make such an oath. "Brother, you are dumb." Jian Qing's eyes were miserable, but he didn't say anything, but his body seemed to age in a flash. "Goodness!" The 9 monks lowered their eyelids and folded their hands together, blessing and consolidating the Hongying lotus peak, not allowing blood to infect. Sha Niang's complexion still hasn't fluctuated, and she didn't mind the 4 bitter words set by the air wheel. In the end, she said, "Okay, I should go." The empty wheel nodded, walking slowly, and his back was firm. The blood blade in her hand became steep and narrow from the wind, almost as tall as her body. The empty wheel had nothing in both hands, but held up the breeze with his hands and looked at her with a smile. The two stopped talking. Shan Yang, holding a narrow and long blood blade, stepped forward and cut her head in front of the empty wheel monk. The empty wheel was like a mountain, and it didn't move, but the clear and bright Buddha light that escaped from his whole body directly swept her away. Blood blade left a deep gully on Hongqiao before barely stopping her figure. The empty wheel's eyes were clear and ethereal, and with each step he took, the Buddha's light behind him forced a point. At the same time, there are thick arms, derived from his back. It is impossible to have no phase, the heaven and the earth are empty, the Tao thinks of reincarnation, and the rebirth is the past, and the end. A series of secret verses were chanted from the mouth of the empty wheel, synthesized into a general trend, and fell into one's body. Although his body was thin, it was as tough as an old tree, and the vigorous vigor within the meridians began to light up. At the same time, he did not know how many arms behind him were shaped like flowers, exposing infinite pressure. As the empty wheel chanted the scriptures, the arms behind them stretched out together, and together they held out a hazy treasure. The long winds and the winds, but like help, let the empty wheel go straight into the blue clouds. Then the obscure Bao Xiangzi suddenly opened his eyes and shot out the golden on. The world is big. At this moment, the thousands of persecutions of the persecuted Sand Devil Cave could not even open their eyes. Sha Niang's eyes were radiant, facing the sweeping golden mansions that lingered, but shook her arms, and turned into thousands of virtual images of blood qi. Each virtual image has the strength of her full blow, and then, like a locust, she rushed to the empty wheel. Buzz! A wave of ripples spread, and the thousands of virtual images of blood qi that went forward and succeeded were like moths slamming the fire, and the rapid nirvana was destroyed in the Huang golden mansions. And this also gave her the chance to get her body like a ghost, quietly turned into a cloud of blood and scattered. "Well, this time I will kill you." Sha Niang's cold voice resounded through the sky. The next moment, her figure quietly condensed on the head of the hazy treasure. An 8-foot narrow and long blood blade was held by her hands, and she was slammed into the hazy treasure's furnace. Blood flew up into the sky, 2 lines of blood tears poured out of the treasure's eyes, and then burst into tears. The sky shook and the empty wheel took a step back. There were not many waves in his eyes. Sha Nyang shattered the hazy treasure phase. Her figure did not stay, but she held the blood blade and fought with the empty wheel in close proximity. The Hongyinglian bridge burst into fine cracks and had a tendency to break. Every brother, no one can be slack. Once Brother Air Wheel is defeated, he will fall forever, and there will be no more robberies. Jian Qing looked heavy, and he tried his best to repair the rainbow shadow on the top of his head. The other 8 monks also looked dignified. They naturally knew how terrible the hard words made by Brother Air Wheel. Since the empty wheel was opened at the beginning of the spiritual wisdom, he began to practice diligently and had an unimaginable enlightenment to the Buddha. And the path of his practice is difficult and unusual, very different from others. He never sat down under the Bodhi tree for one day, but measured the earth with his feet and traveled the mountains, lakes, and lakes in order to practice hard work. Such a determined and persevering person, if the bitter words come true, it will be a tragedy. Therefore, this battle cannot be defeated. Above the Hongying Lotus Peak, the dreadful strength tears apart the sky dome. The empty wheel bears the invisible diamond arm and fights against the Sand Queen. For a time, no one can help anyone. But the empty wheel has a tendency to overwhelm. "Brother Sword, Brother Chuanqiu, who said he will win?" Chen Qing asked. Chuanqiu observed carefully for a moment, and said, "I think that the monk will win. The general situation in him is very strong, and he feels like a mountain." Chen Qing nodded. I also think that the monk will win. He should still have some tricks that haven't come out. When you look back at the lady holding the knife, it's already a little bit out of bounds. If you fight again, there will be no suspense. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and his brows were frowning unconsciously. His view is diametrically opposed to the two. In the midst, he thought that Shan Yangyang would definitely win, but he could not tell any intuitive reason. But at this moment, the truth that had never spoken suddenly said, "The monk will lose." Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and then he glanced at the meaning, and the ideas of the two of them coincided. Chen Qing pouted, and then looked attentively forward. Sword Wushuang, however, had a bit of worry. If the result is true, it means that such a monk died. This is by no means a good result. For those who have been contaminated with cause and effect and bear the Holocaust, it is not a good result. Jian Wushuang had thought about changing the result, but now he is also insecure. His strength is only 20%. The impact is minimal. Hopefully my idea is wrong. He said secretly, paying attention to the final result at the same time. Above the sky dome, battle is in full swing. The empty will transformed itself into 18 treasures, and work together to siege Xiangniang. She is also not weak, and an 8-foot-long blood blade constantly reaps his momentum. Cui Jing, who was in the top fight, has been paying attention to the battle on the sky dome, and his heart is very eager. Afterwards, he turned his attention to those monks who jointly released the power and built the Hongying Lotus Peak. Cui Jing raised his stick and led nearly 1,000 people to repair and went forward. Headed by the monk, he knew the truth of what the monk was looking at, knew Cui Jing's purpose of running towards them, and was even angry. "Dirty beasts, I will definitely ask you to destroy your form today." "No, Brother Jianqing," said Jing Jing, who was still anxious. "If I wait for the strength to come together, Brother Kongluan must be at a disadvantage. What should we do? Do we have to kill ourselves?" Jianqing said with a deep voice. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.